I call to order the Planning Commission, Cape Charles Civic Center, 500 Tazewell Avenue, February 7th, 2023. Can I get a roll call, please?
Holloway present?
Strube present.
McCoy present?
Ashworth present.
Smith present.
Grossman present.
Let it be shown that we have a quorum. Can we all stand for a moment of silence followed by the pledge of allegiance? Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Hi there, young ladies. How are you? You are our only guests tonight.
Which is pretty, well, yeah, even that's exceptional.
Okay, so the next item of business is the Planning Commission representatives to the Harbor Area Review Board. So, Katie, you want to handle this? You want me to handle it or what?
You can handle it. I think
All right,
we're gonna
so
start.
we have two spaces on the Harbor Area Review Board from the Planning Commission, and Kim Buda and Diane D'Amico were our representatives. They meet when needed. When was the last time they met?
About a year ago.
Yeah, so they don't meet a lot.
Well,
So,
let me
and-
say though, in the future, they'll be getting into the master plan and design guidelines. So that's,
yeah,
if nothing else happens, that is a big chunk of work.
so, but I just want to also mention that we also have a representative on the Historic District Review Board, and that's Mike Scroob. And we also have a representative on the
Board of Zoning Appeals.
Board of Zoning Appeals, and that is Jim Holloway. So,
So the rest of you guys should realize that means you need to abstain.
so that's fine. Okay, so we have Bill Ashworth and Shannon Smith said that they would be
Outstanding.
represented.
Outstanding.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Yes, thank you. Right.
And before we move on, and now that you've volunteered, I do want to make you aware, we actually are convening the board into a meeting on February 22nd at 4 p.m. We have right now 2 definitive applications that have come in, and we have 2 that are tentative working towards completion to come in for the same meeting. One is the new town hall, and one is the new visitor center / bathroom center, bathroom building, whatever you want to call it, off of Strawberry Plaza. And the tentative ones is the Rosenwald School Project, and improvements, alterations made to the existing rail car over by Strawberry Station as well. So I just want to make you aware, we are convening you into a meeting to deal with some things. And it's going to be a joint meeting with the Historic District Overlay Board, Historic District Review Board, that's what it's
Right.
called, sorry. So that we can tackle these jointly, since we have overlapping responsibilities due to location issues of where these projects are located. So we will get more information out to you for your calendar. The agenda will be coming out in a week's time, but we'll get an invite sent to you so that you can put it on your calendars. And I realize it may not work for your calendar, but we just wanted to make you aware. We've been struggling for about 3 weeks trying to find a date that I could get a quorum of these boards together.
22nd at 4 p.m.
22nd at 4 p.m.
Who's the chair of that?
It currently is Stuart.
Okay, is he still around?
He is still around. Initially, he was not going to be in attendance for the meeting, but now he's going to be in attendance for the meeting. And Mr. Bennett was I think our vice chairman. Or if he hadn't been selected as vice chairman, he's the next longest serving member of the board, so we would have pulled him up to the ranks to serve, to chair that meeting.
All right. Anything further on that?
that's it, and we will get some more information about what you guys do on that board, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for both Shannon and Bill for stepping up. Next agenda item is consent agenda. Does anyone object to approval of the consent agenda? Hearing no objection, the consent agenda will be taken by unanimous consent. Public hearings, do we have, I don't think anybody signed up. Do we have any?
We have no public hearings, we have, no citizens signed up to speak unless, your children want to weigh in on the status of the town.
All right, so that moves us to unfinished business. Continued review of the work of the Housing Subcommittee on the land use ordinance barriers to housing development, Excel spreadsheets for factors 6, 7, and 8.
So at our work session, we got through factors 1 through 5. We stopped at that point after our 2 hours had expired, and so we still have a couple of leftover tables to work our way through. So if you don't mind, I'll run us through, and again, we're gonna focus only on the items that are in green, which is where, we had some weigh-in from our subcommittee members. So our first one is dealing with the subdivision ordinance standards need to be consistent with the Code of Virginia requirements. Basically, we have deferred our review from the subcommittee level to the consultant, and they are working on that to ensure that we are in full compliance with state code requirements for a subdivision ordinance.
Yeah, Katie, can I just ask a question, Mr. Chairman? So, I mean, I apologize, I had a conflict, and I had to leave that working group meeting a little bit early. But why are we not moving discussion of these factors to another working group? I mean, if the first 5 factors were important enough to be subject to a working group and a more sort of intricate discussion, is there like a reason why we're considering it here and not setting up another working group to discuss these last 3 factors? Because personally, I found the working group to be very, very helpful, and it just gave us, it was just a different format. We had sort of more time to sort of go into to go into more of the details of the different factors.
Sure.
Good catch.
And I won't say it was another working group, it was, the work session that we held the last time was a function of the planning commission.
You're right.
And
right.
so this is still the planning commission, and at the conclusion of our work session, and we realized that we had not actually worked our way through all of these spreadsheets, we raised the issue, would the group as a whole object if we put it on this particular upcoming meeting? One, because I knew we had no other business scheduled for this particular meeting. I had no applications coming in. I had no policy issues that were ready to be brought to this board for consideration. So I didn't want to either just cancel this meeting or only convene it to do some minor procedural appointments and then close this down 2 minutes later. So at that point, the remaining planning commission that was at the work session agreed they were okay with me throwing this on to this particular meeting to kind of take this up. It doesn't mean we can't still, and that's, again, the chairman's call to make this a little less formal. Yes, the formality is we're sitting up here at the dais for our regular meeting because we are broadcast to Facebook, and we do live stream our regular meetings. But other than that, you can open the conversation as much as the chairman wants to permit for this to be a little less formal.
Yeah, no, I mean, my just initial reaction when I saw the agenda and I, went through all the factors was that
Yes.
the first 5 factors deserved and seemed to, they had a more fulsome type of discussion in the working group. And I was just wondering sort of why the last 3 factors weren't given that same sort of fulsome discussion and treatment and.
You can have that.
And,
Yes.
and maybe.
You can
and
have as
maybe-
much
and
of
I-
a comprehensive discussion as you care to.
And of course,
Yes.
I wasn't there, so I had to leave, so of course I'll abide by the decision of the working group, and if that's what everyone agreed to, that's fine, I understand that, but, I guess I just sort of was wondering, is this the way it
Okay.
typically works from a process perspective? And what's the difference between this more formal consideration of the factors and sort of, the working group more sort of, detailed, sort
Can
of
I
consideration of the
chime in?
factors?
Sure,
Okay. Working group does not equal work
work session.
session, right. There's a disconnect in terminology here.
Work session.
Okay. Work session is a work session of the entire board to go over, as you said, and we went through a fair amount of discussion on the first 5 chapters. So it's still the same body of people, potentially the same body of people, depending upon absences and things like that will go over the same thing for the following 3 chapters.
So really, the only difference is the voting. You can't vote at a work session.
Right.
All right?
Right.
So so we're gonna do, just like we had our work session and finish these last 3 factors, full discussion, just like we sat down there at the table and try to get this out. If you'll also notice in the packet, if we agree to this, then it's got to go to public hearing, and Katie wants to put that, if possible, on.
We're gonna start working out some calendars. I can't say we're committed yet for March for public hearing or
Right,
anything,
but it also allows the contractor to start work on that, so.
Yeah, so I expect we'll see this again
You will.
after the consultant gets their
Yes, right.
hands-on,
Yep.
what we produce here,
Yep.
and then we'll go back at it.
And hopefully eliminates the need for another working session this month, unless there's something else we need to look at.
Right, that's correct. You know, a lot of people have busy lives too, and, you know, so that's why another reason why we want to do it, because like she said, we didn't have anything on the agenda to start off with, so,
We have quite a bit on.
Now we do.
well, and now we do, yeah. At that time, we didn't.
I cobbled together a few things.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So again, you can be as formal or as informal as you guys want this evening, and I hope we are informal, because I want to make sure we have a productive conversation. Because time is of the essence. I am trying to get the housing work over to the consultant, so that they can start working on that piece of the zoning ordinance review, based upon the feedback coming from this body. So I hope we can take up these remaining 3 factors, and then I can then formalize and send everything over to the consultant based upon your input and what you have told me you agree with or not agree with of potential changes in the document at this point. And then, of course, we still have additional zoning discussions later on in tonight's meeting as well that the consultant is looking for some input on. So, again, just keep in mind, the only real change to our work session is we are streaming live to Facebook. So please make sure you're talking to your mics,
Yeah.
okay? So with that said, I'm gonna start us back again, just to make you aware. So the subdivision ordinance, it's a pretty technical, chapter. It is really meant to follow the requirements of the Code of Virginia as it relates to subdivisions. So our consultant is going through that to ensure that we are in full compliance with the subdivision requirements in the Code of Virginia. Moving on to page 2, item 4. Again, Code of Virginia compliance standards for timeliness of reviews and the length of validity for approved plats, and plats enable developers to have surety of process and reasonable allowances for site construction. There are a couple of things that the subcommittee talked about, which is the need to review this adequacy of timelines associated with the state agency review, and review according to any of the requirements outlined in the Code of Virginia. I will make you aware of a couple of things that have happened in the Code of Virginia for those who don't know. So typically, once a plat or site plan is approved by my office, it's valid for 5 years. And then once it's been constructed, whatever the project was meant to be, then yes, of course, it is built, it's done, it got approved according to the site plan, built according to the site plan, and it's in place and it's legal. If it should not get built, what happens? In the Code of Virginia, they actually did now 3 extensions of that deadline. The first one happened during the housing crisis, which started back in 2008,
Hey,
9? Yeah, somewhere around there.
Sounds neat.
And they extended the deadline or the applicability of approved site plans and subdivisions until 2020. So they did a natural extension of that by the General Assembly. And then as that was getting ready to expire during COVID, they extended it again. And they called it the COVID extension. And they extended that out till 2023. 2022. And then they did it again last year, and they extended it for one more year. And so now that extension is supposed to expire July 1 of 2023. However, another bill got submitted in the General Assembly this year to extend it one more time. So this basically is allowing things that were approved more than 5 years ago and should have been constructed or built by now if they were going to be built, to now go almost a whole decade past what would have been their natural expiration. Were there valid reasons for that? Absolutely. And the latest one, while they haven't officially named it because it hasn't been approved by the General Assembly, is somewhat associated with the supply chain issue that happened in this last year, year and a half
Right.
with the economy.
Yeah.
From a planning perspective, that's made it really challenging to track these in our system. Things that should have died a natural death some time ago, like these really aren't gonna move forward. There's not even been a smidge of a hint of movement that this is really gonna happen. They're still on the books, and they could happen. So what does that mean for somebody like us in the town of Cape Charles, just so you're aware of what these decisions at the state level have done for us? So if you recall, we talked a lot about the development behind or near Lance Marine's project, which was a new project that has only just recently come forward. And that was done by General Builders LLC, or Angelo Manuel, his projects off of Old Cape Charles Road, where he put in a 4-unit apartment building for the most part. So far, only one of those has been constructed.
Right.
There are 4 acres, 4 one-acre parcels over there. And so his plan, which got approved, was to build 4 of those. Only one happened. And he is now indicating that he wants to progress on building the remaining 3. These were projects that should have happened some time ago. It didn't, but they are still valid, and we are still moving them through the system as if they just got approved in the last 3 years, 4 years. They've got a new lifeblood by these extensions. So this is part of what they're doing for the review. Our consultant is ensuring that we are adhering, if not have incorporated these extensions, these sorts of deadlines within our ordinance documents. I'm not sure I would necessarily change our ordinance language on those because those were set by the General Assembly, and I naturally adhere to and have notified both our building official of these changes and our new deadlines. But sometimes it may not hurt to revise our ordinance to reflect them too. So just to
So
make you aware of those things.
Do you have a database then that shows all plats that you've approved? And then you come and watch construction or not in order to know the delta there?
The town of Cape Charles never maintained such a database, no. So it has been as I have looked at projects, tried to figure out what's been approved, what hasn't been approved, that we have noted these and pulled them forward and are creating that. So for example, there are different subdivisions that have been approved over in Bay Creek. Different levels, different phases, different times. Some have progressed faster than others. So yeah, there's lots of moving pieces we're having to maintain to ensure that they are still valid and occurring, so.
But you're saying, based on the legislature right now, you couldn't do anything anyway
Right.
until July of '23, unless they extend it?
Unless they
Right.
extend it for another year.
All right, got it.
And there's that possibility, that bill has not died. It's still out there and it looks like it's gonna get approved by the General Assembly, that it extends for one more year.
You would have to have a bill number off the top of your head.
I don't off the top of my head, but I can get that for you. So just to make you aware, those are things our office tracks all the time. And so naturally, when you normally think of something, you're saying, oh, we've approved this from the town's perspective, there's a time frame that you expect something to be built. If they're coming to us and they're petitioning us to approve it, to say this is the project we want to do, there's a natural lifespan with the assumption you will put it in motion, you will build this. But I just want to make you aware there has been just some concessions made over the years to reflect what's happened in the economy as a whole, in our society as a whole, and those permissions have been extended, and they're naturally granted by the General Assembly, and so we do adhere to them. I just want to make you aware, while we may not reflect it in our zoning ordinance, that that's the expiration, trust me, I am adhering to it, ensuring we are complying fully with that requirement. So. Okay, number 5, ease of access to ordinances, comp plan and zoning maps to assist developers, community stakeholders, officials, and staff. I am thrilled to talk to you about this one, actually. So once we actually complete what would be our proposed zoning text amendments in this cycle and actually get them incorporated into our zoning ordinance, the town has been working for at least the last 18 months, if not longer, on updating all of its town code in what's called Muni Code, which is the software that hosts the town code.
Right.
And the plan is, we will bring all the zoning ordinance within the Muni Code structure. So as soon as we finish this, whatever our zoning text amendments will be, and we get to a clean zoning ordinance, then the whole thing will get codified as part of Muni Code. And the significance of this is when you go to the town website today,
Right.
the town code is on the front page. It's got a link right there, you can go look up any of the town code. Street requirements, beach issues, whatever. Try looking for the zoning ordinance in the town code, can't find it, not there. You gotta go onto the planning department page, and under there, we host a link called zoning ordinance. We would like to get it part of the town code, so when you search for it, it is easier to find, and I'm so excited that we're gonna be doing this.
Yeah.
So that's number 1. Number 2, I think mapping is really critical for us. It's a feature and function that most zoning officials, planning officials use as part of their job capacity. Typically, as a smaller locality, we wouldn't have this functionality, and we don't. We do not have that functionality beyond what the county supplies at their level. And the county's GIS system, while it contains all of our parcel data, because that's for taxation purposes, they create the database and they do all the primary taxation creations and pass that database onto the towns to then do their own whatever associated billing may happen for their tax system. They don't maintain the zoning information relative to the town parcels. I would love to get to that point that we can host our own mini GIS just for the town of Cape Charles. That would show our zoning layers, that would show our subdivisions, that would show where our sidewalks are and our multi-use trails and the golf cart paths and eventually sewer and water and all sorts of infrastructure issues. That would be great if we could show it in a visual capacity. We're going to. So it was included for funds in the budget, and I am working with our consultant, which is Summit Engineering. They are the ones who are going to be hosting our GIS for us and helping us create those layers and maintaining that so we can offer the GIS link directly on our town website just to see the Cape Charles aerials and Cape Charles zoning information in a visual platform. So we are working on that now. I've just about finished the contract with Summit for this service. And so we are hopeful by beginning of spring, May, latest, that we will have that posted on our website. I'm so excited for that.
Great. That's outstanding.
And I think that covers the access of information. We welcome comments from any member of the Planning Commission as to how we have information contained on our website and our web pages. If we can organize it better, present it differently and more efficiently for the public to find it, let us know, and we will see what we can do to make that happen. So with this comment, I would like to make it easier for the general public to find our information, locate our information. We are hopefully going to be now working on some what I call cheat sheets. Things like a chart of all of our setback requirements by district. So it gets really easy for an architect or engineer to pull the cheat sheet and be able to find, oh, they're in the R1, they're in the PUD R2, here's the requirements for those things. Versus calling our office and asking us, and we're looking it up and shooting them to the right pages of our zoning ordinance or the PUD where to find this information. So we are working now at this point trying to figure out what cheat sheets we need to create, things for fences, things for roofs, things for accessory structures, so it gets a little easier. A one-page, quick guideline for everybody. So. Number 6, ensure plat and plan review processes in compliance with the Code of Virginia. Again, our consultant is looking at that to make sure that we have not missed something in our state code requirements that's contained in our zoning ordinance. So as soon as we have that work product back from the consultant, you guys will be looking at that again. I think that covers this one.
Katie, a question on the next recommendation. About this UDO, the Unified Development Code.
Oh, yes.
So I guess two questions. It says, no action required, consultant legal review to determine if anything else is needed.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I mean,
Sure.
would a unified development code, would that supersede any type of ordinances, that are currently on, like, how would that interface with existing zoning ordinances?
I actually believe the town of Cape Charles is complying, with the concept of a unified development code.
Okay.
As it is stated and contained in both my world and my professional world of planning and zoning. What it means is you wanna make sure that your ordinance contains everything under one group. So everything related to how you do a subdivision is contained within that document. Everything relative to a site plan is contained within that document. Everything related to wetlands is contained within that document of zoning, so that a developer is not having to go to multiple documents to try and locate all that information. I believe ours does that. We list it out as appendices, so we have the main zoning ordinance, and then Appendix A is the site plan, Appendix B is your subdivision ordinance. Wetlands is actually contained within one of our articles. So we have different things spelled out within it. It's all contained within the zoning ordinance. So when you open the zoning ordinance link on our website, all that is included in the table of contents. So anybody who's doing development work can see, it's all right here. They're not having to figure out, okay, now how do I do a subdivision plat? Where are the requirements of that? I think we have achieved that. We just don't call ours a unified development
So the
ordinance.
developer just has to tick through the table of contents and
Yes.
say, have I taken care of this, that, yeah.
Yes, so,
Well,
So-
that's the beauty of going into Municode.
yes.
You can put in your subject and right away it comes across. Now you get Article 1, what does it say? Oh, nothing. Oh, Article 2, what does it say?
Right.
It's very painful.
So yes,
Exercise
migrating
for
us
people.
into Municode and making our zoning ordinance, become fully codified as part of the town code, and it's part of that document, will help tremendously, because when I go search, if I type in, say,
Yeah.
how do they deal with accessory dwelling units in Virginia zoning? I get like 15 examples, and it gives me the direct link to their town code being hosted by Municode or by Civic Plus or whatever vendor they've chosen. It pulls up all those examples. But right now, when you try and search that for what the town of Cape Charles does, it may or may not pull that up in the Google search, for example. So it'd be great getting us codified. It would be a huge step forward for us, especially for developers, architects, engineers who work in this all the time. And they're
Right.
going, it's not in the Municode, it's not in your town code, where is it? And I don't disagree with their complaint on that at all.
For sure.
But we have deferred it to our consultant, because I know I'm giving you my opinion on this, but let's get our third-party set of eyes looking at this, and if there's something else we should be doing to ensure we've met what's considered the unified code concept, then they're gonna highlight that for us. That's all. Okay?
Thank you.
I'm gonna hit page 3, and I know we sort of changed colors here. We went to a little bit of yellow. We just highlighted these because there are a couple of review timeframes outlined in these processes that are really not in our control. Most of them, we don't have to terribly worry about, because I'm not looking to the health department to approve water sewer issues for us, because we are a centralized system. We're maintaining it. We now eventually will be a company who would be doing that, and they would be handling that level of review, and we're working on that process. There is still one outside agency that does weigh in on all of our site plans, all of our subdivision plats, and that's VDOT. And they have their own set of state regulations that trump whatever we might say for a time review
Right.
ordinance. So I just want to make you aware of that. And then if I'm looking at the site plans, and we've already talked about that, so. That's it. Moving on to factor 7. Again, they're finding number 2, non-conforming manufactured homes must be permitted to be replaced by right. Again, our position is we're looking for the consultant's review of our documentation, what we have here, to see how we are complying with the state law. If we are not complying with the state law, I think part of our issue is, again, we don't have many non-conforming manufactured homes that qualify. And maybe I need to restate this a little more. A firm statement, I don't think there are any that fall in this situation for us, meaning they're not a non-conforming issue for us. So I'm not exactly sure what we're trying to solve here.
Yeah, well, you just look at this factor, the maintenance of existing housing. What the consultant has done through the county and the towns is saying, if you don't take care of your existing housing, you know, you drive down 13 and it's, the houses, like, what happened to that one? Yeah, we let it go too far. That's really what they're looking at here. Don't lose some aspects of your existing homes.
Right, and part of where the town was more proactive than I will say at the county level is they've adopted the maintenance code of the building code. And so there is authority that the building official has that can deal with those maintenance issues on houses that the county is not charged with doing. They have not adopted that element of the building code, so they can't go in and require homes to do certain levels of upkeep of natural things that you would do if you own the home, but a lot of people aren't doing. And they are just letting homes fall into disrepair. As one of my outside vendors once told me, there's lots of tree houses in this county. And I didn't understand what that meant. It was houses where trees ended up growing right up through them.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's the sort of stuff I think we have done a good job of ensuring that our homes are being maintained to some standard. Some of it was by default, by people taking an interest in this community, investing in this community, that a lot of the homes were pulled out of disrepair. So I can't say that we always were in the forefront of this, and sometimes it's been a circumstance of the economy has helped ensure our homes are better maintained. But I think we are trying to make a concerted effort, especially in the historic district, not to let homes fall into disrepair, demolition status because of neglect. And so we've worked really hard to ensure we've got processes in place for that. We've got ordinances that deal with it as well. So, but we are asking the consultant to look at this, do another set of eyes on this, and come talk to us if we could do something more.
Where are most of the manufactured homes in Cape Charles? Where are they located? Majority?
Currently, you have quite a few going in on Washington Avenue. I think someone on Madison in Monroe. On Jefferson too. Again, I can't say that there were many older ones that I could see throughout the town, in my drive through the town at this point. That's why I said some of it may not be applicable to us. Definitely this was a comment, I'm not saying it didn't apply to the town of Cape Charles, but I think it was more applicable to maybe other localities that were part of the Berkeley study. And I am gonna point out to the county proper, this definitely was a valid comment, because I think it was more prevalent in
Yeah,
the county.
so the fact that it had reference to Virginia code here, begged then, well, the consultant needs to see that we address that piece. That's why it was stated as such.
So finding number 3, additions to non-conforming dwellings for accessibility is important for seniors aging in place. Excuse me. So again, there's a code citation that talks about this. Currently, our ordinance really does not reflect this, and so we do recognize we probably need to have an update or an amendment proposed in our zoning ordinance. And so we again will flag this to the consultant for that recommendation and language. I will tell you currently how we've been handling in the office, because this has arisen in my tenure in the last year and a half. I'm almost here I'm here 2 years, sorry. Apologize for that. I've worked with the building official, and so where we're seeing things come up and he's coming to me saying, well, this is a building code issue, we need to address this, we are allowing that to take precedence over what might be in our zoning ordinance. So if I'm having a need to address some improvements to the property, adding ramps, adding larger doorways, things of that nature. And we can document it back to whether it be the condition or age of the occupants, and their needs, their medical needs, their health issue needs. We are making that happen. Whether our zoning ordinance is giving us that authority, we are putting in through the building official's authority under the building code. So I just want to make you aware, we're just not doing this. We have found a way to ensure that we are complying with this, even though the zoning ordinance may not give us that authority. We feel the building code does give us that authority to do it, and so we're making it happen. So, everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Then we come down to item number 6. Consider comprehensive plan and ordinance amendments outside of zoning to support preservation of existing housing stock. And the 3 particular programs referenced were the local rehabilitation tax abatement programs, housing rehab toolkit for property owners, and the revitalization grants and loans programs. And Paul, you may want to chime in on this, but we do feel that some of these, because they're grants, they're financial partnerships that the town would have to enter into. We felt that this really needs to be part of a town council conversation as well, to see if that is a commitment that they would like the staff to take on and pursue. Because it isn't just as simple as saying, oh, we'll go do these programs. No, the town actually would have to administer these things. There are financial reporting requirements, there's compliance, there's application processes, there's vetting of the people to ensure that they meet these requirements. So it's not just as simple as saying from a planning commission perspective, we should do these things. We need to align this with the town council and their understanding and agreements to join into such grant programs.
We had, I think, in a previous factor too, the same kind of thing. That we had to elevate it to town council, I can't remember which factor, but there was another recommendation on various programs, and it's like, well, okay, that'd be great, but in reality, you gotta look at what it takes to make something like that happen. We don't have housing authority, we don't have a lot of the bells and whistles that other larger entities have.
Right.
Okay? Then factor 8.
Can I, it's me.
Chime in, please do.
On item number 7, consider adopting ordinances to address unsafe substandard housing. I want to make sure I understand what the consultant or what the report has in mind when they talk about this, because when I read this, I thought about a number of the different houses in town that clearly, when you drive by, we seem to fit the definition of unsafe substandard housing. I mean, they're abandoned. I mean, they're falling down. And the report recommends spotlight type of procedures and the option of a Virginia maintenance code to sort of allow for, as it says, control the design, construction, alteration, addition, engagement, repair, removal, demolition.
Mhm.
Right? I'm assuming from the planning commission recommendation that no further action is required, that the town code and codes that are cited here in the 3rd column already allow for spotlight abatement, or some of the things that are mentioned in the Virginia Maintenance Code? That's
That's correct. So
Alright.
we have, the town has adopted these programs outlined in column 3. Yes.
Yeah.
So we
There's,
do have specific language in the historic district. It's referenced in the commercial district at first, because we wanted to tackle it there for commercial properties. Because I think for a long time, commercial was a real issue, and how what was going on the commercial district, Mason Avenue, was of grave concern to the community. Historic district as a whole, we have it throughout the whole historic district, where we deal with a demolition by neglect. That's really what
Yeah,
we
right.
paraphrase it as. And we have actually implemented it and pursued this as a violation in the last year.
Yeah.
We have had a case.
On
go
Mason
forward
Avenue.
and
Just
had
a couple of
been
doors down
successful
from the
in
library.
getting that taken care of. And that's right on the corner of Randolph and, on Randolph, not far from the town hall. It's currently underway in renovation
Yeah,
now.
I mean-
And so that was a successful pursuit of ensuring,
That's right.
the then property owner was unable and was unwilling to proceed forward with that renovation project. They backed out and they stalled and all sorts of things. So we pursued a violation order against that property, and through a variety of pressure and conversation, that property ended up selling and went to a developer who did move it forward into renovation and are in the process of restoring it. So we successfully did achieve that one. Town's always had that level of success, but I just wanna at least crow upon one of our successes where our ordinance actually worked.
Yep.
And so, as I mentioned, the building code, has been
Yeah, it
adopted
does.
as well as it relates to maintenance. So again, the building official has been given additional authority and latitude to address what we would consider, I won't call it blighted, but those that are falling into disrepair elsewhere. So whether it's in the historic district or not, or it could be historic district, or it could be, say, on the road to Old Cape Charles, off of Old Cape Charles Road, or falling, as you head out of town, whatever properties may be over there. He has certain authorities under that maintenance code of the building, code to do certain things. One of the issues I do wanna stress, and I know people disagree with this, but under his authority, when we're dealing with unsafe properties, what's the remedy for that? In which you may think is fix the house, fix the structure. Sometimes his remedy may be, close it up so that no one can go inside.
Right.
So you may not think that putting up boards and closing off all the window openings and the door openings is attractive or appropriate for our town, and we don't wish that to continue, but that will meet the requirement of the building official. So I do wanna make sure your standards may not align with his, but his job is to ensure that there's no longer a danger,
Right.
for anybody getting in and getting hurt.
Yep.
And so it may not be a full, fix the whole property up to look pretty again. It may be as simple as, we're gonna put up some plywood, and as long as nobody can get in, and the door is safe, and the roof is not collapsing, that is now safe and secure under his definition.
Right.
So, I know you're frowning.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just life.
it's a Band-Aid.
I know, but,
Yeah, yeah.
but that meets his obligations, and it meets the property owner's obligations under the building code. It may not be the solution we would pursue or like to see happen. We would like to see the house restored, into a better condition and hopefully put back on an active use basis. Not necessarily on the tax rolls, because it's still on the tax rolls during all this time, but it's not being actively lived in.
But
And I know that's part of what we would like from a planning side of the equation, to ensure that we're getting full use of all properties.
And if I'm not mistaken, the town has stated publicly that they would like to not demolish buildings in favor of slapping up something new, that they would like to keep the historic housing as much as they possibly can.
Right.
And just keep it safe, keep the roof on, keep the windows closed up,
Yes,
and try to get it redeveloped.
yes.
But that's not all that the spot blight abatement procedure, as articulated in this document, and I'm assuming under the Virginia Code Section 36, allows, right? I mean, it would allow, I'm reading from the document, the locality to take action against blighted properties, which includes a termination of blight, notice to the owner, they have 30 days to respond, and if no appropriate plan is submitted, the locality can repair or acquire the property.
Yeah, we do that,
We do that,
yes.
okay.
And-
Yeah, and.
And this is the other one that
Mason-
requires town council.
Yeah, the Mason,
Involvement.
building that we took down and left the facade there.
Yeah, that was before me.
Yeah, but we put a lien then based on that property for the expense of what the town had to go through.
Okay. So we're not hamstringing ourselves as to
No.
the remedies that are available to
No,
us
I
in
don't think
Virginia
we're
law by
hamstringing
these-
ourselves.
No,
Okay.
you still get into the quandary of, we'll board up that house and we'll sit there.
That's what I'm
And-
getting at.
Well, the problem, the
Right.
problem you get into is sometimes you got heirs that own that house and can't come to a determination of what they wanna do.
Right.
And it sits.
Yep.
And it's prevalent throughout both counties, Accomack, and they have programs that are now demolishing houses. And it's costing the county money to go out, have a contract to demolish these houses. But you'll see in the Eastern Shore Post, they list them and they're going gangbusters in Accomack. And I know that under here, we have demolished houses back, if you look at the historic guidelines from 1990 to the most current, there's like 50 entries missing. And if you go down to the bottom, it's because these houses were taken down. So we're left with a handful, but we do have the means to keep them safe.
And
Now, that may not be adequate for what you're looking at, but that was the intent.
And it's a policy decision that's not, again, not just putting this in the zoning ordinance, it's another one that it has to be done cooperatively with town council. And again, my office and the building official's office, when we start invoking any of these clauses in sections of our various ordinances and town codes, we immediately inform the town manager, and we put it into our weekly reports. And if need be, we start working our way to get before town council, because it ultimately could be the decision, the property owner cannot or will not do the remedies that we are telling them they need to do. And when their time lapses by ordinance requirements, is the town really going to go in and do the work financially? Will we pony up the money in our budget to bring that house into full compliance? And that has to be in partnership with the town council, because that's a budgetary issue. And yes, you have remedy to seek that money, but you have to advance the money up front, and then once you've expended the money, you've done whatever work is necessary to bring it to compliance, then you have to impose the lien. It takes time for that to work through the process. Either they pay it through the tax bill, or we take it through a taxation process, and that's a whole long process. So that's another one that we probably should have said. This is another one that is done jointly with a policy decision with town council. So while we have this authority, I do want to make you aware when your staff is recommending it, we are consulting immediately with town council over our course of action of, like, when we start going down this path, we're going all the way. And we hope the property owner responds accordingly, but we have to presume they may not, and are we prepared as the town to do what needs to be done? And sometimes that's pretty costly. So I just want to make everybody here aware, it's not a question that we won't enforce these things, it's just, it takes time to align our need to enforce to ensure we've got the resources to do it. That's all.
Yeah, one of the challenges, which I'm sure just about everybody here understands, is as a small town, we have very limited resources. And, you know, it's not really practical to do, to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars when there's not a defined need for it. We do very well for what we've got. Nobody's perfect, and we keep getting better. We absolutely keep getting better. But it's a process, as you said. It's a process.
It is.
Yep. But that doesn't mean you don't keep with your battle.
Or just keep the arrow in the quiver.
Yeah, whatever, yes, right.
Okay, factor 8. A locality's growth, including housing locations and diversity in our comp plans and the provisions of affordable housing options. Again, in the Code of Virginia, they require our comp plan to include the designation of areas and implementation of measures for the construction, rehabilitation, and maintenance of affordable housing sufficient to meet the current and future needs of all residents of all levels of income in a locality. And this is actually one of the factors that our consultant is looking at to ensure, now that we've adopted our comp plan, how are we ensuring that it's reflected in our zoning ordinance? So this is clearly an element that our consultant is working on for us. So while we have done some of this, we felt that's in our zoning ordinance, and we're pointing that out for your consideration, and I'm pointing it out for the consultant's consideration, they will be weighing back in with us on this particular item. So.
And Katie, I noticed that the recommendation and comment kind of picks up in the second full paragraph of the key findings. It doesn't address the first paragraph of the key findings. I'm assuming addressing, sort of, those issues as well, about requiring localities to adopt surveys, growth trends, probable future needs, requirements.
Yeah, the consultant for this various study did not have the latest comp plan that we just issued. So that's why they're referencing 2016 and 2009.
Right, okay, thank you. And, yes, it might be a silly question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you know how does the code define affordable housing? Or is that far too, is that a far too more complicated and complex question that we should consider here?
Paul, you wanna field that one?
Yeah, all right, so. You open up a whole different realm of discussion with
Had a
regards
feeling that
to
was gonna
it.
happen.
But again, in earlier factors, we did add definitions on affordability. We
Right.
added definitions. But now, to take that a step further, affordability goes down to 0 to 30% AMI population, 30 to 60. That's the whole gamut of affordability, and you throw in on the 30% utility component, and that's what you've got to work with.
That's what I thought it was. It was like the 150%, the 30%.
Right, so we've
goes
sliced
with
off and
utilities.
we've defined workforce, that's what we're focused on in the comp plan, but doesn't exclude the others,
Right.
okay? And the fact that Cape Charles has developments in that area.
So workforce housing is not necessarily coextensive with affordable housing.
You almost have to, again, you couple, and we went through this argument,
It's
Sure, town
considered
council
one of
way.
the categories within affordable housing.
Okay,
Yes, it
Right.
really is.
all right,
it's a slice of AMI,
got it.
80 to 120, or 80 to 150, and that's your targeted.
Yes, okay, yes, I remember that. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Okay, so moving on to number 2. So again, this is the locality zoning should align with the comprehensive plan goals for housing diversity and affordability. As we stated, yes, this is one of the things specifically that the consultant was charged to do as part of their follow-up work now that the comp plan is done. And part of this is going to be impacted, their review will be impacted by your earlier comments on factors 1 through 6, where we are recommending that we add some additional by right uses, say the duplex house concept and some other things. So I think some of that work that we tackle at the work session, when we forward that over to the consultant, I think is going to make them really happy with us. So just to make you aware of that, because those are conversations I've been having with the consultant. That would be one of their recommendations coming back regardless, so she was thrilled to know that we were already in that conversation, that we were trying to open up some of the more diversity housing options where it'd be multi-tenants being in there, so. Moving down to number 4, if you guys are all good. Incentivize development of housing variety in growth areas, and specifically to offer regulatory incentives for developments within the desired growth areas. Some of these may vary and may be found in modified development standards such as parking reductions, density bonuses, and alternative standards for lots, landscaping, and other requirements. We think, from the housing subcommittee's point of view, we think we have a lot of those incentives and diversity already in place in terms of the small lot size, in terms of where we are with setback requirements, in terms of what our parking regs do say right now of development, especially in the R1 historic areas of town, where, for example, we don't require you to deal with parking on site for any new development that happens in the R1. So we felt we already have quite a sizable amount of that incentivization built into our ordinance, but we wanted to, again, have the consultant look at this a little further for us. And in fact, one of the comments was noted, maybe we should reconsider that parking issue, and do require the undeveloped lots to actually try and resolve some parking needs on their property. But I can't say we're there yet to putting that in as a full recommendation from the subcommittee. If I captured any of that wrong, correct me, but that's where we are today. So I think we're gonna have some more conversation when the consultant comes back with their consideration of this particular issue.
And currently, underground parking is not an option in Cape Charles, is that correct?
I can tell you, you can't do underground
Just
parking.
can't do it?
We hit water when we buried our propane tank.
Okay, all right,
You can't,
just can't do it because of the
no, you can't.
topography.
Unless there's a lot of money somebody wants to throw at that
Well,
problem.
It would be problematic,
Yeah,
very problematic.
yeah. Your water table is very shallow.
I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Again, I'm gonna hit number 5, adopt inclusionary zoning regulations allowed by the Code of Virginia in targeted zoning areas, targeted growth areas, I should say. Again, allowing for some bonus densities and some other things. Again, we talked about this in our earlier factors. While we're gonna let the consultant weigh in on us and see if there's some things we could be offering that we're just not coming to mind on, we feel we are already at the point of offering pretty low density development for land that's required here. We are not in the position that some of the other communities that were part of this study from the Berkeley group that could really fall naturally in offering some better bonus or development density allowances. And again, I'm gonna pick on the county for a minute. So they're one per 20, and what that means in the ag district is for every 20 acres of land, you can have one house. So they do have in their ordinance, but could it be a little more polished to incentivize some development, because it really hasn't been utilized well? Could they offer some things that would allow for greater development, greater density development on those 20 acres? So we're not necessarily requiring 20 acres to build anything over here. Our largest density requirement is in the PUD. If you're gonna have a new PUD, you use 5 acres. Otherwise, in the R1, you only need 5,600 acres, 5,600 square feet, not
Right,
acres, sorry, to build a house. That's not large, and that's intended because we're a town, and we have a certain development pattern that we're trying to maintain here.
Right.
But we'll let the consultant weigh in on us if there's something else you could be doing to encourage some of our housing considerations. Comments?
Okay.
Okay. And then lastly, support comp plan policies and rezoning that allow for adaptive reuse of existing buildings for affordable housing options. Analyze existing vacant buildings for the potential for conversion into affordable housing options. Grants and resources could then be pursued to support these types of projects. When we discussed this, we had lots of conversation at the subcommittee level. And as part of that conversation, I think it came out that the Main Street community has done a survey of some sorts, that maybe that survey information could be beneficial to us, and we should probably see if we can get access to that and bring it to the Planning Commission at some point. But more specifically saying that town staff and the Main Street invite owners of underdeveloped buildings to a work session to discuss further opportunities afforded to them. And this does beg the question, are we talking about districts or properties located in the C1 zone areas of our community? Are we talking of buildings in the R1? And when you talk about adaptive reuse, and we're gonna get into that in my
Yeah, I think
memo.
that's where our conversation needs to go,
Yes.
into the R1 and C1 on your follow-up staff
Right.
item.
And really trying to understand what we
Right,
intend
right.
or would be comfortable supporting, so I think there might be some movement here, some things we could be doing, but I don't think we have a good handle on the issue at large, and really trying to figure out what properties do we can still consider not being sufficiently utilized today, and really what buildings are not being utilized the way we would intend or hope them to be utilized, and what zoning are they in, and what are we willing for them to go to?
Yeah,
or
to
have.
give examples here, I was going through in review, excuse me, reviewing your other item. You take a courthouse that's not used anymore, adaptive reuse converted into housing. They like to take structures, buildings more typically, and say, regardless of the zoning, I want to convert that through adaptive reuse policies into housing and perhaps a little bit of commercial. So that's really the focus. It's not so much on a single-family home,
Right.
saying, oh, that's adaptive use. Although, just thinking about it a little bit, we have a couple parcels within the historic district that are commercial, and that I could see adaptive reuse to a residential. There's not many. We got the bakery or what have you, ice cream place, and we have that red building that's on the corner that has the telephone that's still outside.
Well, there was.
That was
There's also
a,
the church.
The other thing, wasn't
is
there a
already a
CUP came through
residence.
that the requester wanted to have residential at the front and commercial at the back?
Yeah, that's what, we're gonna talk about that tonight.
yeah, so
Flip
there,
it, but yes.
But the same, yeah.
so we'll hold that thought, but that's what I'm saying. It's more focused to buildings. And we'll talk about that when we get to the
And
second.
you've had some of that, and I think that's worthy to point out, and I'm sorry if I'm poking a bear here, but one of your most successful adaptive reuses was the old school, which is now apartments.
Yes.
That would be one of those.
Yeah.
Other things that have had adaptive reuses, maybe not to housing, but it did happen, which was what used to be a hardware, I don't know if it was a hardware store, I think it was, but it's now the brewery.
Cape Charles Christian School, right?
The Cape Charles
It's a
Christian
church.
School from a church, and
And
we've
then
had
there's
other
actually a
conversions
church
of
that is
churches
that's a home.
into homes.
Well,
And
there's
so
there's also
those could be
a
potential things that would come up.
bank that's now a library.
Civic Center.
Yeah,
Yeah. I was gonna say, isn't there a bank that's also now
A
a
bar,
brewery?
yeah.
Or bar? So-
yeah, right,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, and partly this is a conversation that I know I've advocated when we were doing the comp plan. We're limited on commercial space, and so my concern is how much of the commercial zoning district should we push towards residential development? Or how much of that commercial rezoning or zoning should stay commercial and ensure we're still keeping a vibrant commercial sector?
Yeah,
Because you
right.
don't have a lot of commercial space in town, and so from my point, I would probably argue, keep what we have commercial. We do allow residential development on the second floors and above, that's appropriate for me, so that we have some sort of mixed-use development.
Right.
But keeping commercial on the first floor, I think is really, should be a key policy issue for the community at large. Well, before I say we jump into my main memo, we also did have, what I call factor one, items 4 and 6, recommendations for changes to use. So one of the things that Paul did, I think we gave you a copy of this as well in your packet tonight. We went through all of the uses allowed in every zoning district and put it into a chart format. So R1 all the way through our C3, harbor, PUD, the whole works, we listed that all out. And we only pulled forward the uses that we felt could be tied somehow to housing. So if I'm wrong, did we?
Yeah, that was it.
We did give that to you, right?
Yep.
I'm just making sure.
Yep.
And as part of that, we are recommending some changes to the uses. In terms of not necessarily creating a new use type, but that might be some of our recommendations as we work through this, but primarily, should this be a conditional use permit or should this be a permit by right? So I wanna take a minute to look at that. So one that we've already done, which is the accessory dwelling unit, we've already made that change in our zoning ordinance. So that has gone from a conditional use permit to a permit by right with criteria that is contained in our zoning ordinance. So I just wanted to put
Well, let's
everybody-
move up the accessory building.
Oh,
We said R3 was blank, and we couldn't come up with a reason why we wouldn't have,
I didn't
we
even
wouldn't
see
have
that.
put an
Sorry.
accessory building in R3. So we added that, and that's why it's in
Yeah.
red.
Thank you, Paul, and I appreciate that. And structure-wise, what we also did is we gave you how it's defined in our ordinance, so that's a column here so that you can see it all together. Oh, sugar girls are in the restroom.
Okay.
What?
No, we just,
Good.
we all noticed the,
They just put the hot water on.
So,
The ambient
all right, so
sound.
we'll go back to accessory building. Is everyone good that we put in a permit, by right for accessory building in the R3 district? If I hear no objections, I'm gonna keep moving on. Okay, we've already done the accessory dwelling. That is already currently changed in our ordinance, so I need no comment from you at this point. Next one down, I gotta make sure I see all the reds now. Goodness. In the dwellings, comma, condominiums, comma, new, we are recommending, it goes from conditional use to permit by right.
And for some reason, our ordinance requires it to go through BZA, which is
Yeah.
crazy, so, we didn't see a need for that, say crazy.
Okay, everyone's okay with that. Our next one that got marked up was the dwelling cooperatives new. Again, similar to the condominiums, that we felt this should go to a permit by right. Cause it's just a type of ownership, that's all it is. Okay, under the dwellings duplex, we are proposing that they come in as a permit by right in the R1, in the R3, and the CR districts. And we are saying they are not allowed as any kind of use in the harbor, but they could eventually happen in the harbor if it came through as part of a PUD consideration. Everybody okay?
Okay.
So,
Go
good
ahead.
question. For instance, if the former rail yard then becomes part of the harbor district,
It is.
It's part of the harbor overlay district. It
Yeah.
may not have its zoning right now as harbor. Because the railroad property is actually, industrially zoned
right,
right now.
yeah.
So it would need to be rezoned, and if it's rezoned to an existing district, it would comply with those district regulations, or it could go to a proposed PUD.
Right,
Yes,
that's what I was thinking,
yes.
what that possibly could be. Okay, thank you.
Moving on to the next page.
Well, group homes, the dwelling group homes at the bottom,
That fell to the next page on my
Oh,
copy,
okay.
that's all. So dwellings of group homes, move to a by right in the R3 and the CR districts. Okay, moving on. Dwellings, manufactured homes. Again, part of this is how we previously discussed with you of how we're defining manufactured homes. So we did propose some changes you guys agreed to in our work session meeting. So we are looking for those to be by right in the R1, R2, R3, and CR districts. Everybody good? Okay,
Katie, I have a question on that.
yes.
When a PUD goes through its development process, can the PUD supersede something like that thing you just talked about?
Supersede what thing I just talked about?
Okay. You've got new villages going in over Bay Creek,
Yes.
and can you imagine what the existing community would say if you were to decide to put manufactured homes?
They're not allowed in the PUD over there.
That was my question, that's
They're
where it
not
was.
allowed in the PUD.
Sure, sure. So, since we just created a new PUD district,
Right.
as part of that whole proposal,
Right,
he went through, in the development concept of this, he went through what were our existing zoning districts, would any of those work instead of creating a whole new PUD district?
right.
Or he then went through and said, okay, this is the one I'm most closely aligned with, and he went through all the uses outlined by right,
Right.
all the conditional uses,
Right.
and in the document that was proposed and then eventually adopted, highlighted what would be by right, what would be not allowed, what would be conditional use. We
Okay.
went through all of that, and that
Good,
was contained in it. So yeah, I can't
Okay.
just say, well, we've now adopted this, it now applies to your PUD. No,
No,
the
yeah,
PUD
right.
trumps the way
Yeah.
it's adopted,
Good, good.
it's locked down until it
Yeah,
gets
yeah.
amended again.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, dwelling multifamily, I forget this one, Paul. Keep C for public.
Yeah, we didn't change anything. We were talking about the commercial, saying that let's keep that as, if there's multifamily, have a conditional use permit, just
And look at
the
our
way it
parking
is,
regs.
the way it is, yeah.
Right. Okay. And I think that was, no, one more. Dwelling, single family. In the C1, C2, and harbor districts, it's by conditional use permit. Currently in our ordinance, we're saying strike that, if I'm seeing that
Right,
correctly.
that's correct.
And you got the townhouses.
And then dwelling townhouses, everybody's okay with that one? And then dwelling townhouses, that it be permit by right in the R2 and CR districts, and the general business industrial, that's what GBI is.
Can I ask a question just for a point of reference, Casey? I understand that there's been some, and this is just for my own education, I'm sorry to make it quick. I understand that in the past, there's been some confusion as to what exactly constitutes a kitchen facility. And I'm thinking about that, and the manufactured home dwellings.
We now have a definition of
We do,
kitchen
okay.
in our ordinance.
Okay.
As a result of all of our work with accessory dwelling units, we have included a definition now in our zoning ordinance.
Right.
I can't remember exactly what it says, but we have it,
That has been an issue, right? I did hear that correctly, okay,
yes.
all right.
One change I would offer, and it came about as a result of your subsequent staff report that we'll be talking about. Multifamily housing or dwellings, right now, if you go to R2, R2 is the transition between R3 is multifamily and R1 single family. And R2 is a combination of the two. But if you go to R2, the permitted uses is not townhouses, it was duplexes and a couple other things. It didn't have a multifamily component to it.
It has the duplexes, it has the town, you're right, we didn't have it as a townhouse, which is why we were recommending that go into the R2.
But I'm saying, yeah, that's for townhouses, but I'm saying multifamily homes too. The title of that section,
You're right, we didn't address it there.
and I didn't pick it up there until when we'll talk it through later on with the material, but I'm suggesting multifamily dwellings permitted in R2 as well.
So you wanna flip that?
And we may want to hold that until we have our discussion later on.
Okay. I'll put the notation in there. Okay. I think that covers all of our work on the Berkeley Group report.
Okay.
So what's the next step with that?
For all of this, I will take all of our work from the work session as well as tonight and pass all of this with our notations indicating where the planning commission as a whole concurred or did not concur with the recommendation from the housing subcommittee. Pass it all on to our consultant and they will incorporate that as part of their review process and kick some stuff back to us in the next month.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
All right.
So, in that vein, I'm gonna move us to our next report from me.
Well,
Go
yeah,
ahead,
new
Mr.
business,
Chairman.
it's a zoning ordinance review.
Yes. So, again, just to remind everybody, this is part of a contractual obligation that we started more than a year ago. This is phase 2 of that contract. Again, it was a comp plan update first, and we hired Summit Engineering to do that work, and they're the ones continuing doing the zoning ordinance review and proposed amendments. I have provided to them what were the first spreadsheet, which was the internal staff review of some of the things that were bothering us that we've been tracking over the last year plus things. I had forwarded that initially out to the consultant, and by no means is this a full comprehensive list. This was primarily focused in the 3 articles that we primarily deal with on a daily basis. Article 2, which deals with definitions and the penalties and violation phase of things. Article 3, which is your zoning districts themselves and the uses allowed by right and all those components within there. Article 4, which are the general regs, which deals with home occupations, parking regs, signage regs, fences, accessory dwelling units, and all the other little nitpicky things that are uniform across all districts, no matter what their uses are, that you could, have certain encroachments and things of that nature. So that was where the staff review started, was on those 3 chapters, 3 articles that were things that were bugging us as we had to administer this. That was already provided over to the consultant at this point. So then the next thing is we then sent the entire zoning ordinance to them in a fashion that they could sort and review and look at, and so they have been doing that. And I've now done a very lengthy conference call with our consultant with their comments back as they have looked at this ordinance, read it multiple times, and trying to understand its administration and issues that they saw arisen. So that's the focus of this memo for us to discuss tonight. This is, again, not representative of all of their issues and recommended changes. These are some things they're trying to get some direction on from the town to make a recommendation to us how we should address this in the ordinance. So first one dealing with split zoning on tax parcels. How do we feel about that? Do we think a parcel should only have one type of zoning on it? Or do you care if it is split with zoning across a particular parcel? I could not quickly find any such examples that are currently existing on our zoning ordinance today, but it can happen. So I'm going to pick on what we just recently did, Mr. Marine's property. We could have had the PUD happen on just a portion of it and the rest of it stay one zoning district. That would be one example of split zoning that could happen. The harbor could end up being that way. Some of the harbor properties could go that way, where we'd say the railroad, maybe half of it gets sold and purchased and developed one way, and the other half stays a zoning of this. So it happens. It's not uncommon in most communities. It's just your parcels have been so small that this really has not been a tremendous issue. Could it become an issue? It's possible. Do we want a policy that says we really don't want to encourage split zoning on a parcel, on one parcel, on one ownership? We want the zoning to stay consistent across the entire parcel. And so I wanted to have that conversation with you tonight. It's not hard to administer if you have split zoning. It could get a little hairy from time to time, trying to figure out where's that line fallen on a parcel. So if you look at your zoning map, and I'm gonna pick on the railroad property, that's your large one. So if I'm sitting back here, let's see if I can get this right. I'm gonna pick the dark red. To say that gets cut in half, meaning they wanna develop the front half, but they wanna leave the back half, they don't know what they wanna do yet. They don't wanna create new parcels, they only wanna develop the first half, they only wanna put 2 buildings there. But they want that zoning to say, go commercial maybe. Would we as a community support that? As a zoning application coming through, how would we feel about that?
Well,
Anybody's thoughts?
it seems to
Yeah.
me like we would want to maintain flexibility in our zoning requirements,
But
because anything needlessly prohibitive just limits, because we don't know what all options may come forward.
the thing I'm concerned about is the same thing I talked about before, where the applicant has requested that they do residential in front and commercial in back. What would prevent them from using split zoning to justify their case? So, there's pros and cons.
So, 2 thoughts,
Go ahead.
and I think they both sort of follow what Innocent Shannon just said. I seem to recall that we're sort of dealing with that issue right now, the current parcel, where we have a homeowner who lives in his home. There's also sort of another structure that is being used for commercial purposes, right?
Again, we're gonna talk about that parcel later this evening, but it's not split zoning.
That's what I'm saying.
That is not split zoning at all. That is a desire of a property owner wanting to do something else with the structure that the zoning does not allow.
But split zoning would potentially allow it.
If they petitioned and did that and we approved it, if they said, okay, we want to carve this building in half and allow half, the front half to be zoned commercial, the back half to be zoned residential.
Or-
But that's not what's being proposed even in
Okay.
tonight's,
So
you
that's
know,
not what
later
we're-
on in the
that's not what
agenda.
we're talking about.
Well, it could-
Zoning,
it-
that-
No.
It could be.
That is said, you could have
It's-
residential in the front, commercial in the back.
It could, but that's not in this particular, if we're talking about the parcel on
Yeah.
Mason, that's
Right,
not split
right.
zoning, that's a rezoning to a zoning
I'm
designation.
just talking about the one on Peach and Randolph.
Well, we're gonna come to that, but that's not even coming for us at this
And
point
then,
in time.
and then my second thought was along the lines of what Shannon was saying. We just heard about how we're going to face this quandary of, do we want to keep a certain amount of commercial at the expense of residential? Or do we want to sort of expand residential at the expense of commercial? I mean, wouldn't this sort of like, exactly what Shannon was saying, like address that flexibility? If you had a split zone, you could actually sort of, you wouldn't have to sort of play one off against the other. You could actually sort of have part commercial, part residential, and satisfy like both.
You could do that, yes.
Sure.
So, we're lucky, the town is lucky in terms of there are several districts that have that sort of mixed-use combination occurring. So even in your C1 district, we allow some residential.
Right.
Does it have to be through conditional use permit? Does it have to be elevated to a second story or greater? Yes, those are all criteria to allow residential. That's not split zoning, that's your zoning district development and your decision and desire as a community to have mixed uses within that zoning designation.
Right.
That's not the same as split zoning. I just want to make you aware of that.
Right.
The challenge comes is if a parcel, and I'm gonna hit a large parcel. I'm gonna keep using the railroad property, maybe that's a bad example. So,
Why don't you use the Tabby property?
the Tavi property, there you go. So that's zoned, what's my blue, Harbor. The Tavi property, which is the raw vacant piece, fronting on our harbor on Mason Avenue.
It's
If
across-
they came in and
across from
say,
the
we'd like to
Northampton Hotel."
rezone half the parcel to commercial one, and half the parcel to keep it harbor, we could say, okay, we'll let you do that. As a property owner, it's a full, I don't remember how many acres the whole thing is, I'm gonna
11
just,
acres, I think.
what is it?
11. I think.
11, so we cut that in half and say the front half closest to the beach becomes, commercial and the back half stays harbor. And then it comes down to exactly how are we divvying that up? So I'm creating a color on this map. But really, it's trying to figure out what does that mean on the land, but the land isn't getting subdivided. The land is staying under one common ownership, it's staying as one giant parcel. And now trying to figure out the approval and uses that we say yes to through site plans,
Right.
gets a little challenging.
You wouldn't require a subdivision of that parcel?
You don't have to if you allow split zoning. That's not necessarily a requirement for
Okay.
split zoning. I just want to make everybody aware of that. I'm not saying I am proposing split zoning. I'm not saying I'm necessarily for or against it. It happens. We are at the position where I don't think, and that's why I've asked the consultant to go through our GIS database and verify that we don't have any parcels that reside in that gray area. If you don't have to have split zoning, don't. Because then you don't have to try and figure out exactly where does the line sit. Oh, those 20 feet, that really is commercial, not the harbor. You don't get into those sorts of arguments and conversations, whereas in other communities I've worked for, we've had split zoning, and that happened because parcels got subdivided. So we had larger tracts that may have been all ag, and as farmland started to get carved out, as it got sold off, a lot of those got hit with split zoning. So some of it stayed ag, some of it went residential, some of it went commercial, some of it went town edge, some of it, various things happened as these larger parcels started to get whittled down. So really, this is just trying to get your feel or pulse on this. More than anything, if we think there should be a varied amount of use occurring on a particular parcel, we need to either put that into those zoning districts, or
Yeah.
we need to encourage a PUD development
Yeah.
for that parcel.
Kate, can I
More than
clarify
anything.
really quick? So I wanna make sure that you're not saying that the Talby property, even if we said, okay, we are not going to permit split zoning, they can still subdivide that
Yes,
and even maintain ownership, but they can subdivide it.
yes. But split zoning doesn't require a subdivision to happen.
Right.
I just wanted to make everybody aware of that.
Right.
Split
Okay.
zoning it's sometimes challenging to administer. Where does the zoning really lie? Because you haven't done a deed to break it up. You don't have a legal description describing it. I still have all 11 acres sitting as one parcel, and we've arbitrarily put a line down the middle from the town saying, the zoning on this half is this, the zoning on this half is that. And sometimes that gets into some hairy conversations.
It
Just-
seems
Okay.
like we'd like to have, seems like we're not gonna solve
So
tonight, maybe
those-
we want.
And maybe we wanna hear from the consultant,
The
get their
consultant just
viewpoint
say
of
that.
this.
Yeah.
And we can tell her, we've had a robust conversation, and we
Yeah.
still don't have a clear
Well,
for or against position on split zoning. We need to hear from her.
Is the zoning on the south side of Mason the same as the north side?
No,
No.
no,
It's Harbor.
it's all harbor.
Harbor's on the south side, north is, again, it's a mix. On the north, we start with some R1, and then we go over to C1, and then we go to CR. That's on the north side of Mason, so we have various zoning districts across there,
Okay.
yes.
I'm wondering what prompted this discussion.
She asked this and was trying to get a sense of, in
okay.
her read of it.
Throw it
she
back
couldn't
in her
She couldn't
inbox.
understand what's our philosophy on this.
Yeah,
And I
right,
said,
okay.
I
Fair
don't
enough.
know what your philosophy is.
Fair enough.
Because we've never had this conversation. I said, but I'll
Right.
bring it up.
Yes, right.
Well,
Okay, next item, special exceptions. Again, our ordinance lays out the administrative process if special exceptions are included in our zoning ordinance, which is in our Article 2, specifically Section 2.6. But when you look through the rest of the document, we don't talk about special exceptions anywhere else. It's not in Article 3, it's not listed as a type of use within any of our zoning districts, anything of that nature. I did want to make you aware under the law, when they talk special exceptions, it's an interchangeable term for conditional use permits or special use permits as well. I have asked the consultant to investigate how other communities, if they differentiate between conditional use permits, special exceptions, and special use permits. So she is doing that research now for us. I don't have the results of that yet. But we kind of spitballed what we felt were the distinctions between those three categories, and there could be some distinction that we could put in place in our ordinance if we felt so compelled.
Yeah, I'll just offer up, to me, we should take out special exceptions. It's almost thrown in there, we have language and a definition on variance, and we have conditional use permit, and that's the term we use. So special exceptions, unless the consultant can come and say, well, I can show you how special exceptions is different from conditional use, they're gonna have a hard time convincing me. I'd say just drop it.
Well, can we hear from the consultant first? I mean, I tend to agree with
I
Paul.
can tell you that's how I left it with Ann, that she will be bringing back her research results to you. Because we both had challenges trying to clearly define it. And so I said, well, Ann, you're the paid consultant, go do some research for us. And go see what other localities are doing on this particular issue, so.
Because the memo says they're similar to conditional.
That's
use
correct. It
permits,
is.
Which means
Right.
they're not the same.
Right.
How, I'd like to know that. And what are the examples?
Well, I've gone back to my planning commission books, okay?
Yeah.
There is no differentiation that I could see. Now, again, it goes just so far down granularity, but the terms are just thrown out there, and you gotta be careful, because when you talk to towns and counties, we use conditional use, somebody uses special use.
Right.
You know, it's the same thing, and right away you have to step back and go, yeah, okay, they're talking the same thing, different term.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where special exceptions are thrown in there, and it's kind of sprinkled in, yet it's not even defined.
Right. And that's why I gave you the research I could locate on it, trying to help define it by the state code. One of the things that I referenced here, if you've never seen this document, Google it, because it is a great resource. And when two of you who are headed off to the Planning Commissioner Training Academy, you're gonna see this book, and it's gonna be quoted and referenced without fail, which is the County of Albemarle's Land Use Handbook. They have full-time attorneys on staff, and I said attorneys plural.
I'm just confused by the language of the memo, that's all.
And so-
And the next sentence says,
Right.
they're also known as special use permits or conditional use,
Right.
though they may not all necessarily serve the same purpose in a particular locality. And is that because they're just defined, the scope of the definition is different in the locality, or are there really sort of differences between
And
all the terms?
so for example, the couple that I've seen, and I'm gonna hit Richmond, Fairfax County, and Fauquier. They use both special exceptions, they use variances, and they use conditional use permits. I think they also may have used some special use permits, but I can't remember. And their issues are, some of the conditional use permits were things that went, to the Board of Supervisors for them. That's what it is. It's not a town council, it's a Board of Supervisors. So those went to the Planning Commission first, and then it went on to the next step, which was to the Board of Supervisors for final decisions. Others did use the Board of Zoning Appeals to do some of this work. And so they used the different terminology to tell you what board it was headed to. So that's one way that they use it as a differential point of view. And the things that went both to the Planning Commission and on to the Board of Supervisors were the conditional use permits. And those were considered some of the more controversial type of uses.
There you go.
And I'm gonna hit on things like, repair garage centers is one of those that tends to be a hot rod in the community. I can't think of another example off the top of my head, but I know I saw that in a couple of the ordinances. In terms of some other things, they were more a consideration that they felt could be handled at the Board of Zoning Appeals, and only there. And that doesn't require going to the Planning Commission. It just requires one level review where there's a public hearing process, notification sent out, property owners are informed and given a chance to speak, but that Board of Zoning Appeals would act at that meeting or from that one public hearing process. Whereas the conditional use process has you a two-step public hearing process, Planning Commission, then the legislative body, whether it's town council or Board of Supervisors. So that's some of the distinctions I've seen was just in process, not necessarily in the quantity of that level of review. It's just how it went through the system.
Yeah, look, I'm all for the ability to have sort of less is more type of action, right? Sort of stuff. I just want to make sure I know what I'm agreeing to or voting on here by getting rid of special exception, and I'm not clear what I would be approving or disapproving.
And neither am I, but we wanted to start laying the groundwork for you, putting the thoughts into your heads. And yes, I've asked for the consultant to do some additional research to see exactly where special exceptions are used by other localities, how they're used, very specific examples, versus all the other options that are available to everybody to use, conditional use permits or special use permits. What's the distinction? And really try and lay it out for us, and or like Paul, can we just eliminate it because you can handle it through conditional use permit process. So, okay, so put that in your brain for some thoughts. Number 3, view shed. It's included as a defined term in our zoning ordinance as follows, and I've provided you that definition. We do find that the definition is a little unclear as to what we're trying to seek and protect. And then when you actually apply that definition to how that term is used elsewhere in the zoning ordinance, it doesn't do that at all. So I need some understanding of what might have been meant of view sheds and how we really would like to use that terminology in our ordinance, and so would the consultant. It doesn't mean that they won't come back with some recommendations as to how that terminology should be defined and used, but she wanted to see if there were already some thoughts out there as to what we're trying to do here by using the term view shed.
All right, so I'll go back to the document I keep saying is archived now, okay, but it's called out in our statement of intent there, the Harbor Area Master Plan. There it actually has a section on view corridors. And it talks about views of the harbor area or community resource to be protected. And then it has further on in another page, there it had certain criteria for view sheds, and then protect the views and view sheds. Again, it's coming from the historic, in my mind, historic town, looking to the harbor and saying, I want to protect the sight line going down to the harbor, as simple as that.
Right.
Our comp plan talks in the harbor district there, under the design, public access and views to the waterfront should be integrated in a way that is compatible. It's kind of wishy-washy, but again, we brought it over into the comp plan there, saying we want to protect that line of sight down to the harbor. Now, can you physically see it standing, one of the blocks on Fagan, say, or Peach, or whatever, but that was the intent, to protect that. And any road work that is done under the harbor area.
Which is, to your comment, would this necessarily restrict the uses for what is now considered the Tabby property for the same reason?
No, I'm coming from the streets like Harbor, Plum, Peach, Strawberry. That's the line of
Okay.
sight
Got it.
to the harbor that
Okay.
I'm going to try to protect and
Got
not build massive whatever.
Got it. Okay.
But am I wrong in
Go
saying
ahead.
we have allowed development that did not get limited just to ground floor development only? On the harbor,
Yeah.
that interrupted the view shed.
No, for instance, the hand buildings,
That's
right?
what I'm talking about.
Okay, but you have Strawberry Plaza
Yeah,
continuing
Strawberry.
on straight through,
Okay.
right?
he's talking the roads.
I get that, but that's not what the ordinance says, so we need to clean that up, is
Yes.
all I'm trying to get
Yeah,
to.
right.
If that's the intent,
The roads, yeah,
Right,
good,
yeah.
good point there. It's the
Yeah.
road line of sight
Yeah,
to the harbor.
there you go.
so that's what we were trying to get to,
Okay,
is now that I
okay.
have a better understanding of that, we can provide that
Perfect.
clarification to the consultant.
Good. Good.
Road to the harbor. Okay, thank you. Number 4. Under our ordinance, section 3.2C6, this is the zoning district section for residential 1, and through a conditional use permit, this listed use is possible, adaptive reuse. And it states, if an existing structure is a new use different than the intended use for which the structure is originally constructed, the reuse is generally a permitted accessory or conditional use with an adaptation such as density or size that is greater than the ordinance allows. The reuse would require a conditional use permit. The following additional requirements also be met. Compatible with the other permitted uses in the district, the reuse plan must meet the table of parking requirements and landscaping requirements. Replacement and new utility service shall be placed underground. The structure shall be a contributing structure to the Cape Charles Historic District, blah, blah, blah. So again, trying to understand, where would this apply? Have we used
Well,
this
we used it,
before?
you basically said it before, the old high school, old school.
So does it need to retain in this ordinance? And that's what we're trying to figure out, because adaptive reuse typically means you're trying to get it to a different kind of use.
Well, we've had it over the past with regards to a church structure becoming a residential structure.
Okay?
Okay, so that was done within the last 3, 4
And
years.
there's at least 2 or 3 other buildings, right, on Jefferson. The bakery on Jefferson, the little building
Yeah,
that used
but-
to be a
Yeah,
gas station or something.
But that's actually a legal non-conforming use.
Yeah,
So that, just to make you aware,
Okay.
that has to stay in continual use, or if it goes out of business or is discontinued after 2 years,
It reverts.
that
to-
use is
There
extinguished.
What about the one with the payphone outside?
There was the one on Monroe that used to be, Doris Sullivan's house, that used to be a school, a building,
But has not been a school,
for a long time.
right, so it's not a legal non-conforming use anymore. It's now meant to be R1. I'm gonna hit the same on this one, that I've heard about this with the payphone in front of it. Is that a current, is there somebody living in that
No.
property?
No, it's a part business, I think.
What business
part
is there?
Residential. It was it looks like a deli or something that they.
No, not was. What business is in there?
Nothing, no, it's been boarded up for,
Okay, so if it's not been in business in 2 years,
yeah, certainly over 2 years.
it's no longer a legal, non-conforming use with its rights still there. So if it is no longer operating as a business and hasn't for that length of time, then,
So if someone bought it, they would have to make it a residential
Yes.
unit, or they would have to apply for a
They could-
legal
they could-
non-conforming.
nope, they can't apply for legal non-conforming.
Right.
That's a gone use. That is a legal classification built into the Code of Virginia, saying, okay, you guys didn't always have zoning, so we're protecting uses that were in place before you had zoning. And we're saying those uses before zoning are still legal today, even though you've identified in your zoning ordinance, that's not a use you would typically allow here. But the law has protected it. A lot of people call it grandfathered rights.
Right.
Right.
I never use that because when you go look up the word grandfathered in terms of the zoning ordinance, it will never surface there. It's never in the Code of Virginia either. It's called legal non-conforming. So when the statute runs out and the use has not been continued under that statutory timeframe, and
It's gone. Yeah.
it's gone, it goes away. And so you can only use that structure per the zoning district in which it's located in, moving forward.
But the parcel itself may be still non-conforming if it isn't 5,600 square feet or 40.
You're correct. So we deal with that in our ordinance relative to size limitations of lot sizes. We deal with, if a structure's there and it doesn't meet all the setback requirements, we deal with it. But the use itself is no longer legal non-conforming. So it may have other elements of the lot that are still considered
Right,
legal non-conforming,
right.
but
That's all I
the
wanted to
use
say,
is
yeah.
gone.
So what about the residential on the corner of Nectarine and Mason? It used to be a fish place. And it's residential.
Yeah.
Then it's residential.
It's residential now.
Well, it was,
National Conservation.
I don't remember what parcel you're talking about.
Next to Crystal Lake.
it's right across the street from the bakery.
Brown,
Oh, that's residential.
Cinderhawk.
And actually, the people have converted that into a residence.
I know that.
So
But
it's-
it was commercial.
Right.
Yeah.
Next to the building.
Yep.
Next to the house.
Again, and it could be commercial again, because it is zoned CR.
Mm-hmm.
So they could put commercial back in there again.
Yep.
So I'm not saying that is a precluded use at this point. They've chosen to make it all just residential,
Right.
so. I forget what we were talking about, sorry. So,
Well,
yeah, it's me trying to understand adaptive reuse, especially as it relates in the R1 district. And so partly I'm trying to figure out what other properties would classify or qualify for that consideration.
Well, the
I'm not
school,
sure
the
that-
school and those two churches.
Right, so, and maybe that's the answer that we're throwing back to the consultant, is there are several churches.
Yeah, I'd say
Okay.
yes.
I think that helps me. Thank you very much for that.
Now, you argued against doing it for C1.
Yes,
And typically, adaptive reuse is for commercial structures. Now, the fact that we don't, again, you look at our inventory and say, okay, so which of those would I propose adaptive reuse and still retain commercial on the first floor? I don't think we have any that would come to mind.
so,
Yeah.
not that I am encouraging this, but the
Yep.
hardware store, that's still a property that has not successfully found, someone to take it on, the
Okay.
challenge of that development. What if they applied for adaptive reuse that put residential on the first floor?
No. I came across an example of adaptive reuse in Los Angeles or something, and they retained keeping commercial on the first floor. Now, the whole building was an office building. So their adaptive roofs from, second floor up to, I don't know how. But the commercial stayed, and we could still mandate that, but it would be what we mandate anyway,
Right.
right?
And so that's where I was making the argument. I just want to make sure we're really clear. We don't mean that residential could really be an adaptive reuse in the commercial district on the first floor. I don't think that's what
Right.
we intend by this
Right.
ordinance.
Right.
And I would argue so strongly against it, just because if you had lots of land that was zoned commercial, I'd say, sure, consider it. You just don't.
Right.
And, and we need to ensure that we're providing some sort of alternative, income stream to this community off of your commercial base. Because otherwise you've got taxation of your real property, of your real estate, of your homes is a primary income source for the town. And harbor has some income to the town. So I don't wanna detract from what I do consider one of the key factors that council needs to have is still what is some taxation and income that is derived from commerce. And your C1 is vitally important to you. You're getting sales tax out of that, you're getting meals tax out of that. You're getting lots of things out of that help fund your town, and that needs to be retained. That's all I'm trying to get to.
The italicized piece, that's out of our ordinance right
Yes.
now?
Anywhere where I have the italicized, that is the exact.
Yeah, the
language of our
last
ordinance.
item there you want to strike the 50-year-old, we've addressed that in our historic, right? Contributing structure is okay, we've defined that in Article 8 and what have you. We've taken out this at least 50 years old
Okay,
component, so.
got it.
So we're taking the 50 out?
Yeah,
We have already done that in Article 8, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay.
everybody good with, your thoughts on item 4? Moving on, number 5. Again, we have a zoning district called Residential Mixed District, R2. And while I think there's value to what we've defined in the R2 and its uses and it's being a transitory zone between our districts, we've never zoned any land R2.
But that doesn't mean we can't.
Right.
Now, my argument here is it's a mixture of single-family and multifamily housing. But if you go to the permitted uses, it only talks duplex dwellings and anything in R1, or just single-family, kind of, okay? What it doesn't deal with is any multifamily housing, and that's what I was getting at
Yeah.
before.
Correct, which is some of the changes you made just tonight.
So townhouses and
We've defined multifamily housing as anything,
Right,
Three-
that chart we just went through, the last
three-
chart
three
we went
fa-
through
Okay, but
talks about that.
we have duplexes, but I think we need to add the multifamily housing
Right,
as a special
which will
use.
be the chart you reviewed tonight, will show those changes.
Oh, so the words here will go away since you're.
Won't go away, but they'll get added in,
Added
so
to it.
whatever you just did on that chart we last
Okay, well,
voted on,
we-
or
we
acted
held-
on and
Yeah, we
discussed.
held abeyance to that one item
Yes.
there.
Yes, so all that would be passed on.
And I'd argue to keep R2, it could be useful, again, to differentiate between single-family R1s and solely, like Lance may come back and say, hey, I'd like to do a PUD that has a combination, and instead of doing it all multifamily, I wanna have a smattering of,
Or he may not need to do a PUD, he just needs to rezone to R2.
correct,
Yes.
Right.
correct. So that's why I was saying, I could certainly see the potential, and certainly railroad opens up that
Yeah.
discussion as well.
Yep.
Yes. We just wanted to throw it out and make sure we were all okay with that, everybody understands that we haven't applied R2 to any land in town yet.
Right.
Okay. again, we have not done the analysis on the industrially zoned districts. We do have several of those in M1, M2, GBI, GBI H1. At this point, again, we want to throw it out, there's a potential that we may want to consolidate some of these. I don't know that answer yet. When I talked about it with the consultant, I said M1 covers the concrete plant, and so some of that, whether we keep it M1 or something else, it's grandfather, I'm using that term, it is a legal non-conforming use. It was, the concrete plant was here well before zoning ever came to this town. So we've talked about a few of these issues and why we created certain zoning districts of these, the GBI versus GBI H1. There might be some value at some point consolidating those, but we're not exactly gonna focus on that in this round, I'll be honest.
Okay, yeah, because I think there's work to be done there.
Yes.
Some of them are so crazy when you compare them side by side. I forget the two that we were looking when we were talking across, like, Coastal Precast, when you took the two different GBI and M1 or something like that, it was exactly worded the same,
Yeah.
but the permitted uses or conditional uses, and the conditional uses were, it just, it was very,
Right. And
Lock and key?
And kind of where I threw it is that may need to be thrown as part of, if we can bring on a consultant to deal with the harbor regs and not guidelines for the harbor, that might be the appropriate place that we're looking at that. Because that is industrial associated around the harbor, and we maybe need to frame it in that context.
well, we can throw into the hopper there the elimination of RE.
Well, you still have an RE zone
Yeah.
parcel,
Where is that?
the Keck property.
Okay, gotcha. All right. I withdraw.
Okay, moving on to item number 6. Various zoning districts we include in the R1 and the commercial 1 zoning districts, we have a whole section called development standards. And I've enclosed that so you all had the chance to read it. The question is, should we keep that development section here, or should we strip it out and either bring it into Article 8, which is our historic district overlay, or should we stick it into its own chapter, because it's kind of hidden in here. And we continue to have issues of trying to get people to pay attention to it, candidly. These are zoning requirements that deal with like sizes of the porches, your roof pitch, and so some of those elements that we are requiring. They're not just guidelines that belong in our historic district guideline book. These are zoning ordinance stipulations. We said these are requirements of the zoning ordinance you have to have, regardless of the guidelines. These are things and elements and functions that we wanted, but our concern is, do we have it in the right place in this document?
So I'll ask the first question is, does the historic overlay district encompass all of R1?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't think so. No.
No, it's right, it's right.
It's
It doesn't.
not.
It's-
It's not.
Oh, you're
There's
correct,
not.
there's maybe 4 parcels on, up above,
Yeah, up above Washington.
there's
I've
Washington
got
there.
parcels here, I've got this little
Yeah,
corner,
in that little corner, that's the other
right
place
there.
I was going.
Yeah.
You're right.
and that's been always my case. Until they overlap, and that's why, to me, I would, and I understand it has to be ordinance related, but all this is mimicked in the historic district guidelines, in some fashion. Okay, it talks about the standards of development on massing, proportions, window arrangements, roofs, windows, all that stuff is covered in the historic design guidelines. So if I had my druthers, that's where it would belong if it was an exact overlay.
It's not, okay.
If I come in now and build a house on one of these other little parcels, the question is, oh, the historic guidelines don't apply. Therefore, I need to say what does, and that's what's shown here. It's kind of crazy, but actually confusing. Because now if I do go in the historic district, I'm going to look at these design guides and hope that the design guidelines for the historic district is exactly the same. You know, you got roof pitches.
And they
Well,
are.
they are. We happen to make sure they're consistent, but that's the confusion that comes into play.
Yes.
I think you could remove that confusion if it had its own chapter, and you can be specific in that chapter as to where it applies, if it includes the historic district overlay or, you know, whatever it is.
Well, it doesn't go into Article 8, because that's a historic
Right.
overlay.
That's right. It says, should we consider relocating this in Article 8, right? With its own
Yeah,
chapter.
and I think it's right, either Article 8 or its own chapter. We put some options there, where might be a better placement. And the only reason I'm throwing it out is, we don't have this in all the zoning districts. So in terms of how we're presenting the zoning districts, and that's one of the things we've talked about, is we want to get to the point that it's consistently presented across
Right.
every zoning district, so that it does, A is first, B is second, C is third, is what we talk about. Setbacks, then density, then height, then whatever it's going to be. Because there's inconsistency in that information now. So I can't tell anybody who's coming and asking the question, well, in every zoning district, you're always gonna look under item C for the height. And we wanna get to that. That's one thing we wanna fix in this rewrite. The development standards kind of throw us off because it's not in every zoning district, it's only in 2 of them. So we're trying to figure out, is it being noted well enough? And I can tell you, it's consistently asked and thrown out as a question. Had it again today about some new construction. We're like, nope, you gotta still have the whole porch. It's gotta be this size, and that's contained in R3, the R1, in Article 3. You gotta go read that. You're like, well, I didn't see that at all. That's a daily question.
So why not just have its own chapter?
Right.
Okay? Is that fine?
So if we think it could work somewhere else, if whether it's its own chapter thing, we'd like to at least consider that and have the consultant try and
Yeah.
pitch it to us in a better format. I have asked her to update the graphics as well in some of this and make this a little more
Yeah.
tailored to our community, like we did in the historic district guidelines. We did not allow one picture in there that wasn't specific to our community, unless it was an example of do not do this, which of course would not be in our community because we don't do that. So we only allowed the use of outside community pictures only in that case in our historic district guidelines. I would want the same here. I want us to refresh these, because as I said, sometimes I don't understand the proportions. I don't get the yes, no, yes. I don't get everything they're trying to tell me there, just for example, or in the scale and orientation, what they're trying to tell me there, because I don't get the no. I don't understand that no out of the 3 yeses that are there. So we want to get to some better.
Well, then steal some of the historic design guidelines, because they got the
That's what
same
we're
stuff.
going to do.
Yeah,
Yes,
just lift
right.
and
There you go.
cut and paste.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I've got some direction here back to our consultant on number 6. Then as we move to number 7, as I mentioned, we're gonna reformat so the zoning district and its attributes are consistent in terms of themes, following in the same order in each district layout. Besides also listing in a table format, we're gonna, the lot, yard, height, and coverage requirements by the individual zoning districts. We'd like to put it into a table format. We may still keep some of the text. We're gonna see how that looks in this document all the way through. But for me, the table really works because I actually have a cheat sheet of all the districts laid out by table, so I can look right across, R2 is this, R3 is this, what the height is, versus flipping the pages, trying to find that information. So we're gonna be making some tweaks there. Number 8. This one had a fair amount of discussion with us. I think the consultant would still like a chance to talk to you about this a little further. But the term FAR, it's used in the Harbor District, and it's the only use in the Harbor District. We don't explain what the term FAR means. It's not nowhere in our ordinance. I can tell you what it means. It's the floor area ratio, and then how we calculate that, and what it's meant to do for us. And I guess partly I'm trying to understand why FAR was suddenly introduced in the Harbor District versus the other mechanisms we've used in our other zoning districts to determine lot coverage and density allowances. And I couldn't explain that at all to our consultant, why we all of a sudden jumped to FAR. So I didn't know if anybody might know that history and understanding of it.
We've discussed this, and it's
We
been
discussed-
here forever, and we have can never figured out
So,
what the impact, I think, yeah, it was, like the Patrick Han buildings, do you have any idea of what the ratio FAR is for that?
does she know?
FAR was introduced when we were going through the Cape Harbor project, which was proposed for the Tavi property back in 2008-ish. And they were talking about buildings being like 55-foot tall across on the south side of Mason Avenue. And it was described to us, actually, Tom Bonanno was the planner at the time, and he did a demonstration with little blocks to show different FAR and everything to explain. And that's what, but I guess the definition should have been put in there. It made sense at the time.
But the fact that you have setbacks and you have a building height, automatically you're starting to define what the magnitude of a building can be,
Well,
without even discussing FAR.
So this is in the harbor district, and so the harbor district has a lot size of 11,200 feet. And if you use the FAR, that means you can have 19,600 square feet of
Usable space.
usable space.
Okay, but I'll say, what are you gonna build for that space?
I
And
understand.
make sure it doesn't go over 40 feet.
Right, I understand. That's a lot of footage.
Yeah.
That's a lot of square footage.
Yes, it is.
I mean, you know, three stories, that would be the max. So, you know, that's 6,000 something per floor, you know, that's a lot. But that's,
Was it to limit the total square footage, so, you know, if you have a building 40 by 40, and it's 3 floors, if that's a certain number of square footage, maybe you don't want that much square footage, so you say, the FAR can only exceed this much, which means a certain area of it has to be 2 or 3 stories tall, so that it doesn't.
well, that's what this
Is that what
1.75 is that
Yeah.
you can't exceed that. Except,
But FAR is used to control, I don't wanna say density, cause it's not a one-for-one, but it gets thrown around there. But it gives you a sense of controlling a commercial development
yeah, I think it was.
through the FAR ratio.
I think it was because, I go back to the view sheds and stuff, because they don't wanna have, they don't wanna have large buildings down there and you can't see from
Right.
Mason Avenue and you're totally blocking the harbor. You know, we've talked about this before on the train property. Like, yeah, you could have taller buildings in the back, but maybe we should limit them up front, maybe, you know, not 40 feet per se, because it's still 40 there, but maybe 40 in the back and then maybe 30 feet up front.
But you control that through height
Yeah,
of,
that's right.
you know,
Yeah.
break up whatever, as
I
opposed
don't
to
really care. I-
use of a
I-
FAR.
I don't,
When our subcommittee looked at redefining 3 or 4 years ago, the harbor area, and we tweaked the changes for that, we came across this and it was like,
we changed that.
we did, and it was like, we're not sure how it really, for me, to go from a 1.75 up to 2, it's like, so what does that mean?
Yeah.
Give me a specific parcel and I can understand now what you're trying to build there.
So maybe, and again, as I said, the consultant really wants to come talk to you about these concepts, because again, this is it's a philosophy change, it is a development change of how we're looking at property. So maybe if we give her 2 examples and say, okay, look at the Tavi property and its acreage associated with it, and maybe this portion of the harbor, of the railroad property, and see if she can put that into some layman's terms for us to understand the impact of the FAR. And we'll have her schedule that and come talk to you guys, or do a Zoom call or something to go through all this with you, okay?
Fine.
So, And it may make total sense. We just want to make sure everybody understands what it means.
I agree with that.
Yes,
That's all.
yes.
Okay. So where do we go from here? So again, I am scheduled to do a call with her, not this week at all. I think it's next week, but I can't remember. Sometime in the next 2 weeks, we're on another conference call to go through the rest of the chapters. At this point, I will provide her, here by the end of this week, I'll give all the feedback of the housing work we've now done and tonight's meeting with this memo, and provide all that to her. And so we'll probably do this for another potential work session. I can't confirm that, it'll be at the end of February, because she's coming back from some vacation, some time off. So I don't know how far along she is in getting me to a work product for you to actually start to discuss. So if I can leave that open-ended at the moment, I don't think I'm gonna need a work session for the end of February. We may end up doing this as part of your next regular meeting in March, if that is
That's fine.
agreeable to the group as a whole.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that?
Yep. Yep,
Making sure, okay.
Good.
that's fine.
So at that point, as I said, I am starting to work on some draft calendars as to how we think we can start pushing these out into text amendment considerations, and getting them onto the calendar. I have talked with Mr. Hosey. Our goal is to actually do, when we bring this out to public hearing for the zoning text changes, and I may do this in several buckets. I gotta figure out all the changes that we're considering, whether I do them in one fell swoop, or if I divide them up by chapter and run them out that way, I don't know yet. But Mr. Hosey is supportive of us doing these as joint meetings with town council, so that we're limiting the advertising expenses and effort involved in this from the staff perspective for bringing these to public hearing. So I'm hoping within the next month, I will have some better calendars to present to you for your consideration.
Okay.
Okay? That's all I got for item 8A.
All right, 8B, consideration by the planning commission to serve as the applicant for a zoning map amendment, ZMA application for 4 lots on the corner of Mason Avenue and Harbor Avenue. Tax map number 63A2-1-77, 63A3-2-1-75B, 83A3-2-1-75A, and 83A3-2-1-74 from commercial 1, C1, to commercial residential CR.
Okay, so this is one of the cleanup items that was discussed during our comp plan process. I'm sorry it's taken me a couple months to get back around to it, but here I am. So during the comp plan process, I made you aware that at least several parcels were seeking potential rezoning consideration, and we are trying to figure out where our position might be on that from a town perspective. And so the Mason Avenue one, this has come at you in several different formats and several different ways over the last 8 years or so. And primarily it's been the primary lot with the structure on it, with the building on it, that has really been pushing this issue. And so far has not taken residence as to how we would resolve this issue. It has not gone away, but they are desirous of having residential somewhere on that first story, single story building. And while we continually advised the property owner at that time that that needed to happen through the construction of a second story or greater, they just were not intending on doing that construction. They've made that really abundantly clear, and we're now faced with trying to figure out what might be the most desirable solution to try and resolve this, to allow some residential occupancy on the first floor. One of their arguments, and I don't dispute their argument, is there's been inconsistent application of residential requirements on the first floor throughout the town in the commercial 1 zoning district. They're not wrong in that
There are several.
accusation to us. There are several. They've pointed out to the Patrick Hand building, the Strawberry Station phases. There is residential on first floor, and that is commercially zoned. Another one is up by I forget
The
the.
Parsons Building has two in the back.
Parsons Building has two.
And then John Burtis,
The Birds Building also on C1 on Mason. As I head out of town, up near Vance's, there was a new building put in there, a new
Yep.
addition put in there. That has residential in it on the first floor. That's all commercially zoned. I'm not saying that they weren't approved by the town in some fashion. The manner of that approval, if I was your zoning administrator, I would not have approved it under the methods they did it. Some of them were done as variances, and you cannot do a variance, and state law is really clear on this. A variance cannot be for a use in a district. So if it's not a use allowed in the district, a variance cannot overrule that decision of the town. But some of these were done as variances. Some were done under the Fair Housing Act, and trying to say they were gonna supply certain housing types of ADA compliance, and so it was done under the guise of the federal statute. I'm not saying that was a wrong vehicle to use for that purpose, except there were no deed stipulations put on that, restricting it to ensure that these were met for ADA units solely, or anything of that nature. So while their intent was good, I don't think it fully followed through to ensure it always meets that intent and purpose under the federal statute.
And I personally don't feel that was appropriate to say the federal trumps in that particular case and go have at it and build what you need on the first floor.
Right.
I'll just state my case, that's.
So, and I'm with you, Paul, and if maybe they had put in some safeguard measures with a deed restriction or something to that locked it down for that purpose, then I could say they really tried to ensure these were meant for ADA units and ADA units alone. But that's not how it was done. And so that's where I also disagree with how the town did it, but it was done. And we have to live by those decisions that were issued by prior officials.
Correct.
So here we are with this property, trying to figure out, is there a solution? And I did, after I've done extensive looking at this, considering it, looking at your zoning districts, and since we were going through the comp plan process and really looking at the future land use map, I really started looking at this corner at length. And I'm going, well, we have two parcels that have been vacant this whole time. And I do mean the whole time, like the last 30 plus years you've had zoning. Have never gone commercial, not one structure, nothing. Which makes me wonder, maybe the commercial went a little too far in this area of town, and maybe it really isn't C1, maybe it needs to be some sort of transition corridor here. And so I did reach out to the property owner of the two parcels that are vacant. They actually were supportive of changing it from C1 to CR. They do think that would be something that maybe would lead them to develop that land into putting a house that could have commercial uses with it as part of it. The CR is not a foreign concept to us. We use the CR on the other side of Mason extensively. It is a transition corridor as you come out of Mason Avenue. So we raised it during the comp plan process. It seemed to gather some support from the town council as well as from you as the planning commission that you wouldn't be opposed to that.
Right.
And so now here I am asking, would we be willing to serve as the applicant and advance a rezoning of these four parcels from C1 to CR? Shut up.
Well, I guess the assumption here too is since we're desperately in need of commercial property is that the R part would not fulfill a meaningful commercial activity.
It can have a mixed combination. It can have residential plus commercial on the property.
Yeah, I
Or
know,
it
but
can be
so it's
all
on the first floor,
Solely residential.
why wouldn't the whole first floor be commercial? I mean, that'd be the question.
Well, and that's the predicament we're in now,
I
is
know.
that building is C1 and should only have commercial use
Yeah.
occurring in it.
Because when the R part refers to the second story, it makes a whole lot more sense from a historical standpoint too, where there are cities today where that's still the case, where the merchant lives
But that's not a
upstairs.
requirement if it's zoned CR,
Yeah,
And this is the building next to Buskey's.
Yeah.
Walk
Yes.
into Buskey's and make a right.
yes.
it's the old Bakery Communications.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
right.
Broadband.
And there's a little fence yard next to it.
Is there an alleyway in the back?
Yes.
There is.
Yes, there is.
Yes, there is.
Matter of
And
fact,
it
there's a
makes some
rear,
sense.
matter of fact, there's a rear door on this building.
That has the ability for parking?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
And it makes some sense to have this somewhat serve as a transition area from residential one, which is what happens on Harbor Avenue heading towards the beach. That's all residential, except for Northampton Hotel, which did get a rezoning of its own to its use. To having this be this sort of transition corridor before it hits the full C1. Because to date, in the past 30-plus years, two of these parcels have had no development whatsoever. And one has had some commercial, but clearly the current owners, and they've been the owners more than a decade, I believe, are
See,
struggling to find a full commercial use
I
and
guess
want to
for,
have some
for
residential
me,
use from it.
the question really is, you got the three parcels on the end that I could see go to CR as a transition. And then the question is, well, why would you include the building? And the building would be for the convenience of this particular individual.
That's correct, of the current property owners, and again, it'd be one thing if they just recently purchased it, but they have approached this town on numerous occasions of trying to see getting some residential in this property. So it's not the first
No,
time
no,
we're hearing this request.
most of us are acutely aware of what's
Yes.
happened here
Yes.
with it. So, you said it's two properties. You know,
Well,
what's,
it's
what,
two different property
what's-
owners, it's four parcels.
what is that? You got like half a lot there? The blue on there doesn't go over to the street.
Yeah, don't count on the GIS being totally accurate
Okay.
in demonstrating its property lines. It's meant to give us a representation of where they roughly sit. So the property line really goes to the edge of the property, right along the street. I don't want you to think there's another parcel there. It really isn't.
And for the residential portion of the rear of this building, if we went that route, does it have a minimum of 960 square foot?
The building,
No, I'm saying the residential portion of that.
I have not done any of that analysis whatsoever, Paul.
All I'm saying is that if we went that route, it has to meet the
CR.
requirements in the CR district, and I'm saying minimum dwelling size is 960 square feet.
Yes. I have not done that analysis whatsoever. This is as far as we've gotten in this conversation, even to think
Well, I'd
that the
certainly like
town might support a
I'd like to
rezone.
know what that is, because if they can't meet that, now I've got another concern of, okay, we'll give you the CR designation, but, oh, by the way, then you're gonna ask for a variance for the square footage.
Give me a second, I can tell you what the size of that building is.
But we don't know if it's half of it or what, do we?
Hang on, let me at least tell you what the size of the total building is. Okay, the building size is, come on down, Katie. Of course they didn't do the math for me. 110 by 30 feet. What's the math of that? 3,300 is the total gross area of that building, that floor. So could they, their stipulation would have to be that half of that must be not half of it, but
No.
960 must be
Yeah.
dedicated
Yeah,
for
a third of it.
residential? Yes,
A third of it.
so the building itself could comply with that requirement,
Yeah, good.
yes.
I'm in favor of this becoming a CR.
Any discussion? So you make a motion?
I'll make a motion that, these 4 lots located on the corner of Mason Avenue and Harbor Avenue, currently zoned commercial 1 to CR, tax maps 83 alpha 3-2-1-77, 83 alpha 3-2-1-75B, tax map 83 alpha 3-2-1-75 alpha, and 83 alpha 3-2-1-74.
Okay,
And-
so,
And it's not that you're proposing to get rezoned, that you will serve, the town would be willing to serve as the applicant for such an application to advance forward. That's all we're doing, is the application.
Well, why wouldn't the applicants themselves do this? Why
In
is
our,
it-
in
Can
our
we-
conversations during the comp plan process, when we were going through that, the communication I had in trying to say this, saying if the town felt that this was a prudent land use decision moving forward, that it was something that we would stand behind, I indicated that the town may be willing to serve as the applicant. And since it is two disparate property owners, meaning they're not, it's not all under one common ownership, it is two different owners, I said that I would at least propose it to the town to see if they would be willing to step forward to serve as the application for such a rezoning consideration.
So you've not encountered strong objection, I take it?
Neither property owner is opposed to a rezoning being done on these properties.
Second,
okay,
Is there more
Discussion.
Yeah. So I'm not sure I still understand the answer to Paul's question. Why aren't they coming forward as the applicants?
That
I mean, I
could
know
be
we
your
all-
decision today. That could be absolutely your
I'm
decision
just wondering if
today.
anybody knows.
All
I-
I
I
said, what exactly I just said, Bill, is I
Yeah.
told both property
No, I
owners
know.
I would
Yeah.
petition the town, and we've done that through the comp plan process, and it did seem to carry some merit because it's in the future land use map, that we would consider this for some sort of transitional commercial zoning designation, mixed use. And then I would then ask if the town would be willing to actually serve as the applicant for such a zoning text amendment, map amendment pursuit. You could turn that down. You could say, no, we want the property owners to be the applicant. And then I would then approach the two property owners to see if they would take on the cost and that expense and bring it forward on their own. I'm doing exactly what I indicated during the comp plan process I would do. So you could tell me no.
But the comp plan process, you show the future land use for this area, it's still reflected as historic,
District mixed use.
which is not a zoning
No,
no,
designation.
you're correct. It's a land use designation.
And if I go to the historic district mixed use in our comp plan, we talk about commercial below and,
We talk about C1, we talk about C2, we talk about C3, we talk about CR. Those are all mixed-use designations that comprise what is a land
no,
use
but I'm saying
designation.
in the document itself, I just had looked at, we had words for that mixed use that talked about preferably commercial on the first floor and residential above. And bring it with me.
But we also talk about CR, which doesn't have that stipulation. CR does not require residential on the second story.
Okay, but we didn't take that exception in the historic mixed use.
Yes, you did. It is actually one of the considerations of things that things that are in the land use of a mixed use could be zone 2. CR is one of the items that it could be zone 2.
All right, but if I go to the design elements of that, that's where I'm reading in the words of preferably commercial on the first floor and residential above.
But not required. Because
Well,
your
it's
CR does
got
not require
professionally
that.
or whatever, right.
Right. So again, you do not have to take this up. I indicated I would run it up the flagpole, see if the town was willing to serve as the applicant. If you're not, you're not.
Yeah, I'll just mimic what Bill had said. I prefer that the applicants bring this forward and show the desire for, it adds flexibility to their properties, right? One, it gives them a residential in the back of one, and the other one's, well, I can build commercial or I can build a single-family house on the corner. So, you know, I'm open for that discussion. I think it's just the applicants that should be coming to the table and saying, this is what I want.
Is the cost prohibitive?
There is a cost, I wanna say it's $900 for the application.
yeah. But if if we're the applicant, there is no
that per
income,
lot?
right?
Is that per lot?
It's depending upon the application, so what if I only get this request coming in from 2 of them because they don't wish to pay the
Okay,
expense?
so, but,
Go ahead.
so it's per applicant, so if you own 2 lots, it's only gonna be $900.
I wanna make sure that's the fee cost, so, give me 1 second, I'm looking up the fees.
I will say that the person that's in there, I mean, if you knew what happened here, you know, it was gonna be the mother that was gonna live there, and then she passed away.
Right.
And so, I mean, and then, okay, because she was handicapped. And now, and the daughter was staying with her. So now the daughter wants to live there. So that's what, and this has been going on for about 2 years, 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel bad, you know, clamping the lid on this when we have other residential units on first floor in our commercial area. It just drives me crazy that we got there, but, and you can always say, okay, I'm drawing a line in the sand now, but no, I have a tough time doing
Well,
that.
I mean, that's why Katie has brought up another solution, okay? So she's brought up another solution. She's talked with the owners of the lots. They're in favor of changing it. Katie said that she would act as the applicant, so I mean, so.
So that's the only
Good.
repercussion, a fee waiver.
And you don't have the power to do a fee waiver. You don't. I don't have the power to do a fee waiver, you don't have the power to do a fee waiver. The fee structure is set by town council.
And what's
So-
the motivation for making such a change?
Do we think this would be a good zoning change, reflective of the uses for this land?
Because at least it would allow a commercial in the front along Mason and residential in the back.
It could also say, I'm gonna build a home there.
Yes,
I mean,
a
I can
single
sell
family
that
home.
home.
You could very well do that.
You know what? And somebody will do that.
Yep.
I mean, they'll, you know, but hey, you know, that's,
And is that not okay with us? I guess that's the
no,
next
it's,
question I'm gonna throw out
personally,
there.
it's okay with me.
Again,
I mean, it's
absolutely
been-
in
it's-
substance
it's-
support Jim's proposed motion, I just wanna know
Sure.
exactly
Well,
what
I
I'm
got-
voting on.
Sure.
But
I wanna know like what I'm voting on,
I-
by the town being the applicant.
I have a question. You said neither of us have the power to do a fee waiver.
That's correct.
So even if we were to act as the applicant, they would have to still,
No, because we don't charge ourselves. The town does not charge
Okay.
itself when it serves
well,
the
it's
applicant.
effectively, it's a fee waiver.
Right.
Well, it isn't. We're
absorbing the cost
rezoning
of
this.
of all
The
legal
people,
advertisements
the
and
people
Right,
haven't
right.
come to the table yet. They'll eventually come to the table if we make this CR, and they'll petition for zoning, and it could be by right or whatever CR is allowed.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so
But they'll still have to pay for whatever processing.
Yes,
I
yes,
have a-
absolutely, yes,
I have a
correct.
correction, so it's a $500 plus $50 per acre, plus all the costs of the legal advertisement and the certified notification out to property owners, all adjacent property owners. They would have to bear all those costs.
So we could say decline because we don't want to burden the town with the additional, the expense. Right?
You could say that, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor.
Okay, but
Go ahead.
if we vote for that motion, this moves to public hearing.
Right.
Okay? And we don't have an opportunity to say, no, let's step back and say the applicant needs to be bringing this to the table as their desire for rezoning. This goes through the process, and they just sit back and watch.
Yep, yep. Yep.
And again, I'm of the opinion, if they're looking to do this, then they need to be coming to the table. I'm not saying I'd oppose it, but they should be processing it.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that.
Well, we have two options here. withdraw your motion, or we vote for it and hope for what the outcome is. So,
Well, could I withdraw the second? And that would solve the whole thing? Go ahead.
I will withdraw my motion.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Because I'm really in agreement with
Yeah,
this table here, because
yeah,
I really don't think the town should be taking this on.
yeah,
The property owner should be taking this on.
Yep.
Yeah.
all right.
And I think you can convey the consensus is it most likely will go through, but the applicant should be saying, hey, I'm interested in doing such and such.
Yeah.
Will you please consider this?
yeah, yeah.
We're in no rush to change
Well,
anything.
I
here.
am in a rush because
Go
right
ahead.
now this property is in violation. I need to tell you that right now. So I have residency occurring on the first floor of this building, and that's in violation of our zoning ordinance.
Okay, and I have residency in other places.
Yes, right,
This
right.
one is in true violation. We've noted it. We know it's in violation. This is a
Okay,
C1 zoning
well-
district. I just need to make you aware of that.
Okay.
So I have held off pursuing the enforcement of that violation to see if we could work through this process.
And then
we will-
part of your solution would be having them come to the table, just as you do on historic review
we will
board.
Give them a modified period of time to see if they
Right.
come forward and apply for a rezoning application. If they don't, then we will move forward with the enforcement of our zoning ordinance.
There you go. There you go.
Yep.
Bingo. Best possible outcome.
Oh, until you start hearing from me. I don't want to hear from any of you about it.
So you know that this is Ann Hayward Walker's sister?
Yes,
Okay, just make sure.
it was a win.
She's the chairwoman of the Dunes and Wetlands Board.
No, she is not. She is resigned from that position.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, well, she was. All right,
We're now at past 2.5 hours, sir.
Yes,
I know.
final thing,
There we go.
before I turn 75.
yeah. So,
Am I gonna-
moving right along here, report of officers and committees. Let's finish this up, this will be real quick. Standing staff reports.
Okay, you have your monthly report from me. We have done one vacation of lot lines for a parcel, so we have included that for you. It's all under common ownership, and so they have agreed to go ahead and consolidate all those lots and put it all as one clear box now. We had no applications to the BZA for the month of February. And from department staffing, as you know, we have brought on 2 part-time positions. Alice Crockett is our part-time administrative assistant. And Robert James has been hired as our part-time zoning compliance officer, replacing Mr. Buda. And Tracy, we wanted to make you aware, we have done some reclassifying of responsibilities. So Alice will be assisting me in staffing this department, the Planning Commission, as well as our other boards of Harbor Area Review, Wetlands and Coastal Sand Dunes Board. Tracy will be focused on staffing the Historic District Review Board, so you won't see Tracy at these meetings anymore, so we
Right.
want to make you aware of
Right.
that. And that's it for my staff
And
report.
Bob James will be assisting you in zoning administration?
Yes, he'll be helping with the zoning administrator, and he'll be helping to staff the BZA meetings moving forward. Yes.
Good.
All right, announcements, our next meeting is Tuesday, March 7th, 2023.
Yep.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.